Call to order the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. May I have a roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Beebe? Ms. Beebe is present. Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Bofi?
Here.
Ms. Bofi is present. Ms. Bradford? Ms. Dastug?
Here.
Ms. Dastug is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Gio?
Present.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Hill?
Present.
Ms. Hill is present. Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer? Mr. Romer is present. And our student representative, Mr. Nakhan?
Present.
Mr. Nakhan is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's begin with the first item on the agenda.
Board members, you have one item on consent, and that's item 3.1. May I have approval for the consent agenda?
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Dastug, second by Mr. Lee. Are there any questions about this item? Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
Next item is on page 1, item 2.1. Consideration of a request for a statewide waiver of Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, Section 2318, the College and Career Diploma. Department recommendation is to approve.
Is there a motion? Ms. Dastug, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Gio?
I have a comment.
Superintendent, would you like to speak to this one?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Romer?
I appreciate the reason why this is being done, but, I just want to make certain that, in fact, we make sure the college and career diploma has meaning and is preparing our kids properly. This is a special circumstance that we would be treating similar students differently. So I think this rectifies that, which I support, but I want to make sure this board adheres to the idea that the college and career diploma needs to be rigorous and meaningful. Thank you.
Any other board members? Is there anyone opposed? If not, motion carries. Next item.
Next item is on page 2, item 2.2, consideration of the early childhood community pilots. Department recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, but I do have some questions at some
Thank you.
point.
And if I may just make comments as
Okay.
well.
I need a second. So I had a motion by Ms. Dastug, a second by Ms. Orange Jones. Ms. Dastug, would you like to ask your questions now or wait till after?
Do you have public comment?
Yes.
Okay, and the superintendent wants to present it. I can
Yes.
wait.
Sure, okay. Just, this is an item that we said we would come back with last time. We have introduced, as you know, the idea that in following on the legislature's requirement to establish an early childhood network of care and education, that our strategy as it's evolved, as you know, has been to, rather than making specific policy at the board level now as to the early childhood network that the board will oversee, to instead pilot a set of regional or parish-based networks across the state. So I want to emphasize that what we're talking about here today is not a final policy decision. It is really just a concept that we'll then go and solicit applications for. Some who may give comment today have provided comment in advance of the meeting, and we're in ongoing conversations with them about the structure of the pilot. But at its basic level, the pilot asks partners, including Head Start, traditional public school systems, and providers of child care, to come together at the local level to themselves create systems that bring children into the network, that provide levels of academic standards and equity for all of those students, that distribute dollars in a way that is coordinated across the network, and that train educators in a way that is coordinated across the network. In essence, we're trying to learn from the practitioners as to how a network would work. And we know it's going to play out differently in rural environments from urban environments. So this period today is really to come to you, to ask you to receive this, to hear your comment, to hear public comment on it, so that as we take further steps, we know that we're getting this right. We will be releasing an RFA. That RFA will not be final until, obviously, after this comment is heard so that we can incorporate it. We're in discussions with many of our partners, and we've benefited greatly from a collaborative process that we intend to continue as collaborative. So, Madam Chairman, thank you so much for the time.
You're welcome. Mr. Lee?
I think this is a movement in the right direction. We all know how important early childhood is, and coordinated services are clearly needed. I know that you will, but I want to emphasize, pardon me, that we look at the needs of children and not permit self-serving interests to get involved. Thanks.
Any other board members before we take public comment?
I can go ahead and put my questions out there.
Okay.
Mr. Superintendent, on the pilot, as I'm reading it, I don't know if these questions have been answered yet, but maybe you can give me some sense of what direction you're heading. And the programs that participate in the pilot agree to, like in the first item, identify infant to age 5 children. Is that something that the department and the agencies would participate with the schools in doing? I mean, how do you envision, how would that responsibility be shared?
Well, there would be a lead partner on the pilot, and the lead partner would be responsible for coordinating these processes across the groups of partners. But I think one thing that we've learned, for example, on that one in starting this, is that it's important that in a locality we start with a base of understanding of how many kids are there actually and where do they live. One of the pieces of the pilot is funding, so that you're funded to build the staff capacity into the consortium that allows you to do some of these things. So the staff that would be purchased would be able to implement.
Okay, so the way it is that there would be 5 programs, essentially up to 5 programs approved, and then within that consortium, there would be individuals hired that would be charged with coordinating and this task.
Yes. Yes.
Would that also follow for the unified application process? Is that something that would be created by the consortium?
Yes.
Or by the, okay.
With our support. I mean, clearly, we have an early childhood staff. We would support that process.
And we know how to do it. We've done it before.
Yeah, we've done that before, yeah.
Okay.
And what we're envisioning on that is not a highly technical, single online platform kind of deal. Instead, it's just, if we were going to coordinate this, how would we coordinate it across different programs at the regional level or the parish level?
Okay, and then I guess my third question would be, it requires these programs have plans, and one of the plans would be about increasing the number of children 0 to 5 that are deemed at risk in quality settings, I think is the way it's read. So would that mean that the plan would have a goal that they would increase the percentage of students that they're serving?
Yes.
But not increase the number of students that they're serving? I mean...
Well, I think it could be, one of the outcomes could be that it increases the number of students that they're serving. I think the idea is that when the groups come together, if you've counted every student, every child, and you've used your resources effectively, then you're using them efficiently, meaning that as many children as require services are gaining services. Now, it could be that there isn't capacity in a given parish to serve every child, and if that's the outcome of that specific process, then so be it. But our numbers show that there are seats that go unused, even in places where there is a need for such services. And so outreach efforts should yield greater efficiency in terms of the use of those seats.
So you're really looking for it to increase the percentage of students that are at risk, and also perhaps the number of students being served?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'm not sure that that's very clear. And and then I guess another recommendation that has been talked about a little bit, and I've seen some evidence in school systems that have braided funding, like where they take early childhood and the AG and Head Start, and they are able to take those dollars and hire a certain number of teachers. Is that does a pilot, I would imagine, would support those types of activities, because that's a really efficient way to educate children. We've talked about this for quite a while. how would that impact, and would the pilot address centers like child care centers, which is another big provider of particularly 0-3s? How would they have the opportunity to ensure that they can do the same thing? You know, have the opportunity to sort of braid funds and be able to create classrooms out of multiple sources? Because isn't that the goal, the overriding goal of all of this?
It is. In terms of you mean just how would they be involved in the process?
Yes, I mean, like, will there be child care centers that are in this
Absolutely.
pilot?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're, remember that this is a competitive process, so we're looking for the best applications.
Okay.
And the best application will be one that's the most comprehensive and will be the most inclusive of various types of providers, yes.
Okay, but with the pilot, like, what if in the competitive process that there were no child care centers who made the top 5? Would you allow the pilot to go forward without there being a participation of a child care center?
Well, one thing we're going to be looking at is what percentage of the seats in a given area are actually represented as part of the consortium that's applying for these funds. So if we see an application that is simply a school board or a district coming to us and saying, we want this money for our programs, but Head Start is not at the table, child care is not at the table, and private providers are not at the table, that's not going to fly. This application is specifically for a cross-governance structure consortium that brings together Head Start with the LA4 system, with the child care system.
And I think there's some examples that the board members received a letter, I think, was it Langston Hughes perhaps, who was partnering with a child care center, and that's the way that they have found an efficient way to deliver these services. Like there are districts, I understand there are a couple of school districts that actually partner with child care centers, which makes a lot of sense because they're building their future students. They're
Yep.
supporting and engaged, and who will walk through that school door one day. So I think those types of partnerships are probably going to be very interesting to watch and to
Agreed.
see and to encourage. So thank you.
Agreed.
Are there comments from any other board members before we take public comments? We have a stack of cards for public comments, so if you individually filled out a card, then you will have 3 minutes. If you defer to someone in your organization, then the speaker will have 5 minutes. So the first person I have is Dr. Ann Meese. After Ann Meese, we'll go with Margot Phelps.
As you heard, I'm Dr. Ann Meese. I represent the League of Women Voters of Louisiana, and I am the education chair of the League of Women Voters of New Orleans. The League of Women Voters has long supported a high foundation program with allowance for the greater need of some pupils and with provisions for meeting state-mandated education achievement goals. Our goal is to stabilize and permanently fund a high-quality pre-kindergarten system for Louisiana children eligible for free and reduced lunch that meets both national and state standards. We commend the Louisiana Early Childhood Education Network 2013-15 community pilots for bringing together successful practices and addressing challenges as they emerge. We commend the inclusion of the many local agencies that are involved in a variety of ways in the education of young children. We encourage the grant awardees to be mandated to include those who serve 0 to 2 and 3, as well as 4-year-olds. We also recognize that funding for early childhood currently is inadequate. Since funding for early childhood is shared by many state agencies, we suggest that on the local level that perhaps innovations in integrating these different threads be considered a pilot component. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meese. Ms. Phelps, I understand that Janet Bean is giving you her time, so 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Margot Phelps, and I am Vice Chair of the Education Committee for Citizens
Sorry, I could hear you.
Okay. As you know from prior testimony, Citizens for One Greater New Orleans supports early childhood education and understands its importance. We are delighted that this initiative will begin with pilots before being rolled out across the state, and we believe the goals stated are laudable. There are some identifiable challenges which the state will face in bringing Act 3 to scale. We feel that pilots should specifically address these and that the RFA should explicitly state these expectations. First of all, we feel that the pilots should use at least one diverse delivery model. There are very few diverse delivery facilities in Louisiana, although this is considered a best practice nationwide. By requiring the use of at least one diverse delivery model in each pilot, we will learn ways of designing and supporting this type of facility. Second, the pilots should agree to braid funds. Since there is no new money for Act 3, braiding would maximize revenue by using the multiple funding sources available. This is easy to state, but we doubt that it will be very easy to accomplish, and it will be especially challenging in the diverse delivery model. Finally, we believe that pilots should include some programs for birth to 2. This is an underserved group of children, and including this directive in the pilots would help the state determine how best to serve the youngest of its citizens and how to best access and use child care assistance funds. In conclusion, Citizens for One Greater New Orleans applauds the use of pilots and feels that they should be used to innovate and forge pathways to address the challenges which we know lie ahead. By tackling the difficult issues in pilots, we will all learn how best to address the needs before rolling out the program statewide. Thank you all very much for your consideration on these suggestions.
Thank you. The next person I have up is Miss Melanie Bronfen. We also have cards from Carol McCall and Ruthie Frierson, and they've asked for Melanie to speak on their behalf. So Melanie, will set the timer for 5 minutes. Melanie passed out some comments ahead of time, board members. Let us know if you did not receive those.
Thank you. Good morning, or afternoon, I guess at this point. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Melanie Bronfen, Director of the Policy Institute at the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. We are a nonprofit organization that serves as an independent source of data, research, and information for policymakers, stakeholders, and the public at large around issues related to young children in Louisiana. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Department of Education, the superintendent, and especially Jenna Conway, Kay Eichler, and Lisa Brochard for their collaboration with us as they have developed the broad outline for the pilots. We applaud the excellent general goals that they have articulated in their one-pager. However, I would ask that serious consideration be given to two major concerns that we have with the strategies that have been outlined to achieve those goals, and these have been discussed today with the previous votes. The first concern relates to the lack of a strategy, a specific strategy in the pilots to explore models of braiding early childhood funding streams across diverse settings. Our recommendations to address this concern, and we have a number of specific recommendations that I outline in the handout that you have before you. Piloting braiding of funding is especially important since no new funds are being offered in the pilots for service delivery. That is, for the creation of new slots. The funding will be more for administrative kind of work. The most limited and restrictive funding stream for early childhood care and education is child care assistance. As you can see in the chart on page 2 of our handout, it is a very limited amount of money per child, and the rules for eligibility and payment are extremely restrictive. However, child care assistance is the major public funding source for children ages 0 to 2, and in most cases, the only public funding available to the child care sector, which serves a large percentage of the children ages birth to 5. To achieve braided funding streams, the pilots, perhaps at least 3 to 5 of them or all 5, should require the creation of diverse delivery, which, as mentioned, is a best practice across the country, where LA4 classes and/or Head Start slots are located in child care centers, braiding these funding streams with child care assistance so that the centers can serve the most at-risk children, but still have the funding to achieve the high quality that we're striving to achieve. There are a few examples, as mentioned already, of diverse delivery, but very few, unfortunately, in our state. There are some in Monroe, and the article that you have is from, in New Orleans, the article you have is from a principal there, but also there's one in Monroe and one or two in Livingston Parish. And I encourage you to read that letter to the editor from the principal who is participating in diverse delivery for his district. In addition, and this is critical, we urge the departments to waive for the pilots some of the current restrictions on child care assistance funding to facilitate innovation and maximize the potential to braid the current funding streams. Also, we would ask that the pilots conduct a survey of the vacancies in the private sector programs by age and quality of the program to provide the information needed of where high-quality programs have space for more children and might be interested in diverse delivery. Finally, we would ask that the pilot sites also be required to include a specific number of slots in each age group so that we can be sure to test these assessments across the age spectrum. Our second concern, I'm afraid I did not have a chance to create a handout on, so it's not explained in our handout, but relates to what seems to be some of the expectation of the local networks in these pilots and the breadth of what is being asked to do. And some of this has been addressed with Ms. Dastu's questions. But we are concerned that given the short time frame and the available funding for the sites and the lack of infrastructure locally where school systems, Head Start, and child care have sat at the table in the past, which has not been happening, and frankly, sadly, there's a great deal of distrust among those different groups, given past history and things that have happened with funding, so that, frankly, I think getting them to the table first will be wonderful and critical, but for them to get to the table and then start creating new things, as well as then implementing those things, I think will be a great deal to ask. And I fear maybe setting up the pilots for failure.
Ms. Bronfman?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that what that was?
Yes. I do not have my cell phone on.
Okay.
It's Ms. Davis's timer.
Thank you. I'll talk even faster. If they are asked to decide. Oh,
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. Yes,
Okay.
we have a lot of comment cards
Okay,
for
so
this
we would
mini
ask,
meeting.
our concern is about things concerning, for example, where the pilots are supposed to both create and then implement a universal application for 4-year-olds.
Thank you, Ms. Bronfman.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have John Warner Smith, and after John Warner Smith, we have Sandra Myers. Good morning. Afternoon.
I'm sorry, John Warner Smith, CEO of Education's Next Horizon. I'm going to pick up where Melanie left off with probably about 80% of what she said. I'm going to say in maybe 10 words. Education's Next Horizon has embraced this concept from the beginning. We support it. We encouraged the state policymakers and the state team to go in this direction and our recommendations. And I just want to restate, at least in part, what we recommended to the state in September, because it gets right to the point. I think that at least half the point that Melanie was making. Given the magnitude and complexity of the early learning system, it is recommended that the newly created network allow for programs to be piloted or phased in. Louisiana should look to its diverse delivery settings as a pilot model. I think that says it all. We certainly look forward to working more closely with the state leaders, the state team, and looking at the request for applications and giving some input in that component of your process before it goes out sometime later this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Sandra Myers.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Sandra Mars, as she said. I come to you as an educator with 18 years of teaching experience in elementary classrooms, 5 years as an elementary school principal, and for the past 17 years as a Head Start director in a program administered by a school system. I want to tell you this morning and this afternoon comments about the direction of early childhood in Louisiana. I strongly support the move to strengthen early childhood because I believe that's the formative years. That's what we need to help children achieve, not later on whenever they have fallen through the cracks. And I believe it's going to benefit Louisiana's children to have a consistent early childhood development framework. However, in my years with Head Start, I have found that many people have a limited, even tunnel vision view of what Head Start really is. And I would like to share that with you for this 48-year-old program because I believe it's relevant to our early childhood decisions. First of all, the Head Start Act of 2007 was the impetus for all of the nation's states in coming together to create early childhood programs. It mandated it. Head Start is often referred to as the nation's premier early childhood program, even sometimes called Early Childhood Practices Lab, because it is. So many early childhood models, including pre-K, have been designed on the basis of the Head Start model. For example, the Early Childhood Creative Curriculum, which is recognized by early childhood people as an outstanding program, was designed by Diane Trista Dodge, who's considered a guru in early childhood. She actually began her education career in the Head Start program as an education specialist, and when she moved into the public education community, she used her Head Start experience to design the early childhood model and creative curriculum that is used by so many programs in the United States. Another example is that here in the state of Louisiana, benchmarks were outlined for Louisiana based on the performance standards of Head Start. Head Start requires the same elements as pre-K and in curriculums, in school readiness goals, etc. We have to communicate with Dallas. In summary, Head Start's a quality program and it's parallel to pre-K except in licensing. In considering the pilot, Head Start and daycare centers are all included in the revised early childhood framework. They must comply with licensing standards or have licenses revoked and their centers closed. In the new vision of early childhood and in the interest of our children, who should have a level playing field from all services, the pre-K programs should also be included in the licensing standards that will as well force them to comply with those standards or have their program closed. All children need to be part of an early childhood system that will be the best for all of them. I had mine set too. Thank you.
I like that. Thank you very much. Do any of the board members have comments now that we've heard public comment?
Yes, I do. Superintendent White, maybe you can help me understand. With the pilot program, would there be a mental health piece component involved in this program when we're looking at those applicants? Because I do know Head Start, they do provide case management, community involvement. I'm not quite sure about LA4 or some of the other programs throughout the state, but I do know Head Start is required, which is a federal guideline that they have to follow. So would there be a piece where we look at that mental health piece due to that the governor has cut so many programs, especially the ECSS program, that focus on birth to 5-year-olds that have behavior and emotional issues?
Well, certainly many of the programs that will operate within the network offer services that you described, and many of the assessments that we'll be using will allow for screening on not just academic but also developmental issues for the child. At the same time, it won't be setting up, it's not planned to at least set up or establish specific mental health programs or additional grants of that kind. Although I think we'd be willing to consider whether or not it could be included as a factor in selection, kind of consideration of planning around those issues and so that we don't create a new program, but we basically say, are you including this in your program? Is that, Jenna, is that a fair statement? We don't need is that just where we are? Okay, all right, good.
Okay, because I think that's very critical we look at the nation as a whole
Yeah,
and
I
where they're
agree.
going. So if we can catch while they're young,
Yeah.
we can save more money then. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Agreed, yeah.
Yes, Ms. Beebe?
Yes, and I just wanted to piggyback some comments or observations made by Ms. Melanie. The fact remains that, and I think it's very critical that you have the partnerships, of the child care centers, Head Start, and so forth. But then we have that distrust piece that she brought to light. And so, within the time frame that we're operating, that's a real concern for me. And I just wish that, to do it right, that we were afforded more time. And I know you're proposing the pilot, but I think this is a serious consideration that we need to pursue, because, I can speak to my district, the St. Martin Parish School System. While we do have a good rapport, we would still have to build those relationships. Moving forward.
Yeah, agreed. This is going to be a big challenge. I think our strategy is to try to lift to the surface and shine a light on the places that do have this collaboration to show the rest of the state that we can have that on a local basis. I agree with you. That's going to be one of the most difficult parts.
And within our districts, we may want that, but we don't have the time to develop it overnight. I mean, so
Sure.
I just think we're rushing, but.
Well, the full network, it doesn't come into play until 2015-16. So I think we have 3 years until such time as this will actually take place in St. Martin or what have you. But I take your words as caution.
So I have a question about how this will work. In terms of the pilots, I mean, pilots can run differently, and then I see that we're going to be granting people some dollars to actually try this out. So is it that they are going to give you a proposal that meets these guidelines, and that on their terms they do the work? Or are we creating a framework that we expect people to institute?
A little bit of both, because the RFA, the request for application, will create a framework within which they apply and say, here is essentially our plan for achieving this framework. So in other words, we're giving them a framework, but it's their plan within the framework. And part of that is that we're hoping to recruit diverse applicants, because we know that this looks very different in a densely packed urban area from one of our rural parishes, for example.
Okay. So it'll depend on what the RFA ultimately looks like then. Will drive the work that's being done.
Yes, I think to Ms. Hill's point, in part, the values that we place in the RFA, which we've gone into some depth about here, will determine what a quality application is considered. And that will obviously determine who's involved and who's not.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up, please. You made reference that we have 2015, but technically the pilot begins now, 2013.
The pilot begins in the summer of 2013. Yes, the pilot does.
But I mean, it puts those districts who wish to compete, if you will, at a disadvantage if that partnership is not where it should be.
True. And I think the partnership is designed to capitalize on those places that already have some level of partnership as a demonstration site, in essence. So I think you're right. Those places are going to probably have to have a head start.
So in essence, do we have those 5 identified?
No.
Or no?
No.
But it's giving them an unfair advantage, and maybe.
Well, I mean, you have to start somewhere, and I think we're going to have to ask those places that are a little bit ahead. I mean, I think that the legislature modeled this after the fact that there are already places that have a seamless system of early childhood. It just happens to be kind of hit and miss right now.
Is there anyone opposed to the motion? If not, motion carries. Next item, please.
Next item is on page 8, item 4.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, to update and streamline policies related to school and district decisions. Department recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
So I have a number of comment cards for this one. We are going to stick to the timelines. And I do also, in some of the comment cards, have people who want to express opposition or support, and so we'll definitely say their names as well. Instead of taking a motion on this one right away, I'm going to go to the superintendent first, and then to the public comment, and allow the board members to listen to the public comment before I entertain a motion.
Thank you.
Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted a chance to talk with the board and with the audience about this specific proposal, about what it is, because it's a lot, and about where specifically the desire for these changes comes from, and what would happen were they to manifest. And I want to start with just a little bit about my experience as a teacher, and probably many of you who have worked in schools, your experiences. As many of you know, those of you who work in personnel, for example, Ms. Beebe, know that early in teachers' careers, oftentimes they adhere to relatively rigid lesson structures and classroom management that is sometimes even heavy-handed. Students they put in place systems that whereby students obey because there are rigid systems of discipline and management in place, and that's sometimes necessary for beginning teachers who haven't yet developed all of the systems that they might need otherwise. But over time, you hope that the teacher doesn't continue with these rigid rules and classroom management by way of order, but that effectively over time, the students are the ones who run the system. And that the best managed classrooms are those where students can justify the rules to themselves, can rationalize them for themselves, and can run the discussions and the higher order thinking themselves. And I view schools and school systems and state education systems, not in exactly the same way, but in a similar way, which is that in order to show progress, you do need to have a sense of, yes, this is what I do every day when I come to work. But over time, as people demonstrate progress, you want the agents of the system to take hold themselves of making the decisions. And you want not to have to rely on rigid rules. And as a result, what's been proposed today actually has nothing to do with whether or not the state wants to see specific people do specific things. It has nothing to do with the state or this board wanting specific people to be hired or not. It has nothing to do with whether or not this board wants to see specific textbooks chosen or not. It has nothing to do with plans for ID badges being better one than the other. It has nothing to do with whether or not some students deserve credit in your eyes or mine, or whether some students don't deserve credit in your eyes or mine. It has nothing to do with whether or not you think that the length of the school year should be a certain number of days, or it should be a different number of days. The point is, members of the board, that the proposal here is that we as a state agency and you as a state agency not make these decisions instead of educators. Again, let me repeat that. This is not a proposal that takes a stand on whether counseling should be done by one person or another. It says counseling is important. It's not one, and must be done. It's not one that says that libraries should be operated in a certain way or not, technology-based or paper-based. It says services have to be provided. It doesn't say how they should be done. It's not one that says that physical education should be provided in one way or another. It says it must be provided, it must be rigorous, but it's not going to determine at a state level how it is done and how it's not. So this proposal, though it covers many of those content areas, has something to say most about the role of the state agency versus the role of educators. That is what this proposal is about. What is the role of a state agency versus what is the role of practitioners? And I would submit that as in a classroom that is overly tightly managed by a novice teacher, the price of relying on rules rather than relying on the intelligence and commitment of the people who run classrooms and schools is that it stifles creativity. When you tell people how to think about their jobs, it stifles creativity. And if you stifle creativity, then forever you are locked in the current paradigm. And we know we have a long way to go. So why would we stifle creativity with a set of rules that I believe too often reduce the intellect and the discretion of educators? When A, we've shown progress, like that novice teacher, and B, we know that the path forward is one that gives them greater authority rather than us trying to hold authority. Because our ability at the state level to create new ideas is vastly outweighed by their ability to create new ideas and a better process forward. Now, people will say, if you do that, you're running a risk. If you do that, if you cede control, you're running a risk. Bad things will happen. And I have two responses. Number one, that ignores the fact that you have passed rules that have made the educators of this state more accountable for results than ever before. We are accountable for results in this state. Thus, you should rest assured that if students are not achieving what it is that they intend to achieve, we have letter grades. We have an educator evaluation system. We are rating educators. We are rating schools. We are rating school systems. We are rating ourselves, as was discussed this morning, based on student outcomes. This is a highly accountable education system for results. But at the same time, I would say that in their place, we've placed this accountability system that will unlock an innovation. It will unlock creativity. It will unlock better outcomes. And that we won't forever be able, and is frankly hubristic for us to sit up here on this board and think that we forever will be able to mitigate every possible risk, because the greater risk is that we don't move forward. The greater risk is that we actually have an environment where educators are disempowered to create. And so, board members, I hope that we hear the public comment. I know we've heard a lot of comment over the last several weeks. I hope we take that into account and make smart policy. But I ask that you consider adopting a new role as a state. A role that says we accept some risk because the risk of not being creative is the biggest risk. We have faith in our educators because our schools have made great progress. 75% of our schools made progress last year. And that we are at a place in time, because that we are so accountable, that it is okay to say to educators, you have demonstrated your ability to make decisions. It is time to return the education decisions to the educators, and that's what this policy is about. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our public comment, we're going to stick to our 3-minute rule, and I'll try to tell you when your name is coming up so that you can anticipate that. So we're going to start with Katie McElvin, and I would appreciate it if you would help me with pronunciation when I get it wrong. Katie. After Katie, we'll have Mary Ballard, Kathy Smith, and Dr. Jennifer Curry.
Hi, I'm Katie McKelvin.
Thank you.
As I
Is
sat
her
back-
mic on?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
on.
okay.
Thank you. As I sat back there hoping that I wouldn't be the first one to come up here, my name was called first, so I'm just going to take advantage of this opportunity that I have. I am a 25-year-old master's level. I'll be graduating in May from a 60-hour master's level counseling program, and understandably, the concern here is not about the specifics, but for me it is, because I see how you're trying, what you're trying to do here, as he stated. But my concern is we publicly educate our professional school counselors in the role of academic, career, and personal social. And this proposal would suggest that we aren't important, and that as master's level graduate, that I'm going into a field that may become obsolete, because we have suggested that maybe in the elementary and middle school level that we could do away with those, or give the districts the opportunity to do away with those. As it stands, the American School Account. I'm very nervous.
We understand. Everybody who sits there gets nervous.
As it stands, the American School Counseling Association and the Louisiana School Counseling Association suggest that the counselor ratio be 250 to 1. That's 250 kids to 1 student. Louisiana right now suggests we have 450 to 1 student. And now this could totally be disregarded in the elementary and middle school level, saying that we can choose not to hire those because of a money situation. Because that's what I see this as. It's not technically about whether we can do our jobs about. It's about where we can cut. And it's just not, it's not rational, especially in the state that the United States is in right now. I mean, this is a very important part of our educational system, and to see it be offhandedly disregarded is very discouraging for someone coming up in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ballard?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Ballard, and I am a counselor educator. Started out as a classroom teacher, counselor, principal, now counselor educator. So I guess I've done a little bit of everything. I want to really begin by thanking the board for something that I have worked on for my 25 years in this state, and that is the revisions that were made last time to the bulletin in regards to educating counselors in terms of having them come from KCREP programs, yay team, and also for mandating that the Louisiana model be implemented. I really felt for the first time in a long time you had provided us the foundation that we finally need to go out and implement the programs that we all are trained and know how to do, because for very long we just didn't have that foundation or the support to do that. So thank you. I got really excited, big celebration, and I find that it may be just a tad premature. I'm hoping not. But I'm asking you, please don't take a step back. I understand we need sweeping changes in this state. Believe me, no one's more on board with that than I am. And what I want you to know is we are your agents of change. We can help bring that about. You're not going to find a master's level person who is trained to do the academic, the career, and the personal social stuff all rolled into one person. You're not going to find that in any other entity out there or any kind of private provider unless they're also employing school counselors. So again, I beg you, I plead with you, please don't take a step back. We have come so very far. What you just did to the bulletin was monumental, and I thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Yes, my name's Kathy Smith, and I'm the Louisiana School Counseling Association president. Every day, I make a difference in a student's life because I am a school counselor. I help to increase graduation rates. I help to reduce bullying behavior. I help to lower discipline infractions. I motivate students to achieve higher grades and live up to their potential. I open doors and help students visualize and achieve their future goals and plans, and to promote a positive school climate. And I give support and collaborate with teachers, parents, administrators, all for what's in the best interest of the student, because I am a school counselor. Yes, school counselors can do all of these things and more. According to a study at the University of Pittsburgh, school counselors appear to be, listen up, cost-effective way of improving academic achievement. Cost-effective way of improving academic achievement. Yes, I am a school counselor, and I can do all these things, but not because I'm special or because I'm great. All school counselors that implement this counseling model can achieve these things. Louisiana has been so supportive, as you just heard, in helping change the role of the school counselors for the last several years. About 7 years ago, a few people from the Department of Ed and BESE, Ms. Dastrude, you were one of them, believed the role of the school counselor had an impact on the student achievement and overall well-being of the student. They created a professional school counseling task force. This task force worked diligently and eventually developed the Louisiana school counseling model. That is what I was referring to when I said that all school counselors can do this with this program. Next, a blue ribbon committee was formed, and you, the BESE board, overwhelmingly supported the entire report. Finally came a very important piece, but it is just this year, the compass evaluation for school counselors. This too will hold school counselors accountable for what they do each and every day. If one is lacking in an area, they will need to improve and eventually have a great school counseling program, making a difference every day, or they will need to change professions, and it's that simple. I understand you're not trying to eliminate school counselors. However, I feel that this would be opening the door to do so. Louisiana finally has everything in place to have schools have a data-driven, great school counseling program. So please don't fail Louisiana students now. Leave Bulletin 741 as is, as it pertains to school counselors, and give the model, the compass, the evaluation, and your approved Blue Ribbon Committee recommendations a chance to work, to continue to change the face of the role of the school counselor in Louisiana. Yes, I do make a difference every single day in a student's life because I am a school counselor.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Before we go to Dr. Curry, I just want to ask Kathy Hill, Rudy Macklin, James Simmons, and Alex Marico to be ready. Oh, I'm sorry, they're combining their time, so whoever the speaker is can come forward. Dr. Curry, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. I would like to echo Dr. Ballard's comment. Thank you for what you do for kids. I do not envy being in the position to make the hard choices you make. So I thank you for what you do. I'm here today, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my background so that you know that my expertise and credentials are valid. I have a master's from Vanderbilt University. I've been an elementary, middle, and high school counselor. I have a PhD from Central Florida. I have been an assistant professor at LSU for 6 years, although I'm hearing that I'm going to be an associate professor because I just got tenure. I am not here representing LSU. I am here as a concerned citizen. I teach school counseling, and I have recently written a pre-K through 12th grade career and college readiness textbook. I am a national expert on K-12 career and college readiness, on dropout prevention, on how we help kids connect academics to the world of work, and what helps increase student options for post-secondary entrance and matriculation and success. I'm an expert on STEM and how we get kids to go into STEM. These are the things that we are teaching in counselor education. Thanks to Blue Ribbon Commission, and I did serve on the Blue Ribbon Commission with several people who are up there on your board, we pushed in this state to align school counselor certification with national standards for accreditation. School counselors are trained on career and college readiness like no other professional. It is in every course I teach. If you hire somebody to do career work in your school who's got a PE degree, believe me, there's no amount of professional development that is going to take the place of a 48-hour master's degree that is nationally accredited. It is one of the hardest accreditations to get. Many of the counseling programs in the state are now not only accredited through KCREP, which is the Council for Accreditation of Counseling and Related Education Programs, they're also NCATE accredited and SACS accredited. We are teaching school counselors to be accountable to make sure that that 2014 goal of 80% happens. We cannot afford to throw away any more opportunities or to hope that some patched together counseling program where people have bachelor's degrees and are going out and serving kids in career and college readiness are going to do the work that is necessary to save this state. People have got to graduate from college. There are no throwaway people, and minorities and low SES kids have suffered long enough. Now, I've already told you I'm the national expert. If you want a copy of the book, I will happily get you one. I want to serve you. If you have questions about this, if I can meet you, have coffee with you, talk to you about it, I want to do it. We can make this work. Please make sure our counselors stay in their schools. And if you want to help them be creative, let them implement the model.
Can I say one?
Yes.
I just want to clarify for the board that and this is not in opposition at all to what was just said, but that the model that was endorsed by the Blue Ribbon Commission was then endorsed by BESE. This is not a change that's been proposed in regulations that change that model. In fact, that model is not in a regulation. That is just an endorsement that BESE made of that model. So that model still exists. The Compass rubric still exists. I know no one here is saying that they don't, but I want to just draw the distinction between those things still exist for there to be good counseling in the state. We agree it's best practice. Just as with a set of other things here, we're proposing that around specific rules that tell principals this is exactly how you need to organize, this gives flexibility on that, which is a different question from the actual model itself. We agree with all of those who spoke. We support the model. And I know BESE continues its endorsement of the model.
So I named a group of people, and I was told that they are going to have one spokesperson. No? Everyone's speaking? Okay. Come forward. I'm sorry. Are you Ms. Hill? Kathy Hill? Great. So you'll each have 3 minutes.
I'm Manny Baracco, Jefferson Parish. I wanted to share my, since I am a lifetime educator, I wanted to share my professional opinion with you today. And I really appreciate the opportunity to do this because I've spent 27 years at one high school as a teacher and as a coach. And the last 11 I've spent as a director of physical education and athletics. And right now there's a proposal to allow extracurricular to count towards a credit for physical education.
It's a half credit.
Half credit, yes, sir. Thank you. And I just wanted to tell you there's a different value. And being an ex-athlete and athletic director, you would think I would be so much for the athletic end, but I'm not. There's a difference between the two. In physical education, there's certified instructors. And in coaching, we have coaches, sponsors. We have volunteers who are outside of our school system. Teachers have contracts for the year, and the extracurricular has a small stipend. Physical educators develop lifelong skills and healthy lifestyle components, where in extracurricular we develop a talent. Physical educators integrate subject matter in a lesson, and extracurriculars in competition to win. PE instructions develop in motor skills, where we might have a band playing an instrument, a cheerleader yelling out a cheer, or a football player making a tackle. Our partners in physical education and health, we have Pennington, ULL, in Jefferson in particular, LSU Ag Center, American Heart Association, Ochsner, Fuel Up to Play, Play 60, BFIT Initiative, the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, and our sponsors and our partners in extracurricular sporting goods stores or businesses that sometimes will make money off of those particular groups. Physical educators have evaluations for PE accountability. We have a fitness gram where we collect data and track kids. We have student learning targets in physical education. In extracurricular, it's about participation and success, and sometimes a record. And I do want to commend our board because a couple things have come out that have assisted us. One was a couple of years ago, the SPPW grant, Schools Putting Prevention to Work, where we're working with our physical educators. And we're having things at schools that never took place before. We have fitness nights, we have activity nights, and healthy eating and healthy choices nights at schools. Also, our state has provided us with standards and grade level expectations through Ms. Ann Wilson and Mike Como over the years.
I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay. So anyway, I'm just here to express my opinion that I am for keeping the two separate and letting physical education count for your credit and not athletics and extracurricular.
Thank you. Mr. Simmons, are you going next?
I'm next.
Okay.
Excuse me. James Simmons, Director of Athletics, Student Activities, Health and Phys Ed for Lafayette Parish School System. In the position that I have, it's just sort of unique because I get to cover all that we're talking about right now. I've had music, I've supervised health and PE, I'm in charge of athletics, I have spirit, and I can tell you that they all stand on their own. None of them are alike. Before I go any further, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to be up here to defend our programs. But some other things that I want to talk about is that physical activity or physical education is an inclusion of educating all the children, not just some of the children. We have kids with specific needs, and there are certain phys ed curriculums that we have for that. We have adaptive phys ed, we have modified phys ed, and we have regular phys ed. It provides opportunities for kids to develop the skills needed to learn in order to work and live together in society through the acceptance of individual differences. I asked a coach one day, I said, I don't want to hear about the kid that can bench press 600 pounds, have a vertical leap of 40 inches,
run a 4.2 in the 40. I want to know what you're doing for the kid that's in your phys ed class. Out of the 150, 180 kids that you teach every day, have you taught that kid to do 1 pull-up or 2 pull-ups? And those are the kids that we try to reach because there's more of them than the other. Also, phys ed utilizes a variety of authentic assessment techniques, reports and journals, in addition to skill evaluation. We have state and national standards that guide the formulation of our curriculum. And we are ahead of the game in Louisiana because we had our standards and benchmarks way before we even thought about implementing them on a statewide level. We have adopted GLEs to make sure that all our students have success in order to achieve success. We have all skill levels. We focus on helping each other in a supportive environment. And also we focus on monitoring target, heart rate, health-related fitness, and benefits of exercise. One thing that we have a humongous, in which our system was able to get in Lafayette Parish. We have received the Carol M. White PEP grant. And that grant is a federal grant. It was worth over $400,000, and it was geared toward physical education. It wasn't geared toward athletics, it wasn't geared toward spirit or music or dance. And that touched more kids there than I can say that it would touch the other kids. And so just to sum it up, I want to say that all kids participate in a sequential developmental appropriate program of physical activity.
Just before we move away from the supervisors, would you mind if I asked a question? Sure. And by the way, thank you so much for being here. It's helpful to hear people who are closer to the challenge. Does the policy as proposed mean that your parish can no longer grant credit in the way that it chooses? In other words, are we making you grant credit by way of this policy?
I don't think so.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that we had the same understanding because this policy does not, at least in my interpretation, make a school or a school system grant credit for something. It provides an option. Thank you.
Ms. Hill? Are you speaking for Rudy Macklin as well?
No, I'm hoping he'll show up. He's been here twice and had to go back to DHH for a meeting, but he was here at 10.
Okay, that's fine. I can just put his little card right there and I'll call him again.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Kathy Hill, and I am representing the 1,200 members of the State Health and Physical Education Association. Our association is 74 years old, and for 18 years I served as the executive director of the organization. For many years, until about 5 or 6 years ago when Michael Como was put in as the physical education coordinator, I spent a lot of time up here in my role as executive director to kind of work with BESE on any kind of an issue regarding physical education. I will tell you that the board has rejected a proposal of this nature on 3 different occasions that were requesting marching band and extracurricular activities to be substituted for physical education credit. The last time was when Superintendent Picard was here, and after that meeting he sent letters to principals and superintendents stating that there would be no substitutions for physical education. And we would hope, obviously, that will stay the same. You've heard the testimony of very passionate individuals, and I suspect some of you have been getting some emails or text messages. We have basically 4 concerns. One is that this opens a can of worms. Would you waive an art requirement for a student who takes violin, or the student who is in debate club and wants English, or is in a foreign language club that would like to be given credit for foreign language? Those are all typically considered extracurricular activities, and we deem the other mentioned things in our field to be the same thing. We have assessment issues. How will these students be graded? What about the injured athlete that cannot participate after sustaining an injury? There is a perception now in schools, in high schools and college, that athletes receive special consideration, and we feel like this almost perpetuates that same kind of notion. Will there be pressure on the coaches to pass athletes so that they will be academically eligible? The third issue is that none of the proposed areas have any kind of standards or GLEs that cover their content. And fourthly, I appreciate your comment, Superintendent White, and one of the things that we feel strongly about, just like our colleagues in counseling, is that what is there today is substantial. And so we would ask that you leave it the way it is and not change it because it has a lot of integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person we have is Wendy Rock, then Chris Belser, Lee Barrios, and then Michael Desatel.
If, as the speakers are coming to speak, Madam Chairman, may I just give, I want to give background because there's so many policies embedded within this one policy. The physical education policy is a half credit substitute, and I appreciate very much the comments of these leaders in their field. A couple of just quick thoughts on it is 1/2 credit out of the 2 credits dedicated to physical education and health. It is not a replacement for the full 1.5 physical education. It is just a 1/2 credit. You can only have 1/2 credit of replacement.
May I ask a question to the superintendent?
Yes.
So this does not preclude any student from taking 2 full units or even 3 and 4, correct, of PE, should they choose to?
That's true. At the same time, were they to get to PE 3 and 4, there would not be GLEs. So there is actually not GLEs currently for Phys Ed 3 and 4. And just by way of background, 32 states have this exception already on the books, including Colorado, Massachusetts, Connecticut, which are the 3 least obese states in the country. I would also add that we already have an exception on the rules for ROTC in our state. So the can of worms, so to speak, has, I think, already been opened. But I take the caution, and I respect the comments.
Thank you, Superintendent. We'll go to Ms. Rock.
Hi, I'm Wendy Rock, and I'm a school counselor. I've been moving towards becoming a data-driven school counselor since the 2004-2005 school year. In that year, I kept data on what courses my students were scheduling, and I was able to increase the number of students taking college preparatory math in their senior year by 27% from the previous year. The number of seniors taking a 4th social studies by 26%. The seniors taking science that year increased by 17% over the previous year, and the number of seniors who requested early release decreased by 11%. I considered this a victory in helping my students become college and career ready. In 2010-2011, the counselors at my school began counseling students when they returned from suspension. That year, my students' repeat suspensions decreased by 60%. Last year, I had 10 students come talk to me about suicidal thoughts. Of those, 7 were hospitalized in psychiatric hospitals for treatment. Those students felt safe coming to talk to me about these thoughts because in every single case, I had developed a relationship with my students through classroom guidance activities and through individual counseling. This year, I have 2 student learning targets. One is to increase minority enrollment in advanced placement classes. The other is to continue my work in decreasing the repeat suspension rate. These 2 SLTs make up 50% of my evaluation. The other 50% is the Compass rubric for school counselors. I'd like to keep my job as a school counselor and be eligible for pay raises in the future, so I'm very committed to these SLTs. This is what school counselors do. Our work in academic, personal, social, and college and career domains increases college going rates and graduation rates, decreases discipline incident rates, increases attendance rates. In addition, we provide support for students who are grieving, who've lost their home to fire, or may be considering suicide. We're trained to identify mental health concerns and make appropriate referrals. I hear talk about the ineffectiveness of school counselors. Counselor effectiveness is impacted by the counselor-student ratio. The more students assigned to the school counselor, the less effective he or she will be. Additionally, and this is important, counselors can't be effective when they are assigned non-counselor duties. Coordination of 504, test coordination, substitute teaching, duty. Unfortunately, educational leadership programs do not train administrators on how to hire, supervise, or evaluate school counselors. Oftentimes, principals are not aware of the positive effects school counselors can have when they are doing the job they're trained to do. I'm hoping Compass will begin to change this. Consider this: if you eliminate the school counselor mandate, will these partnerships, vendors, and part-time staff be held accountable with an evaluation tool such as Compass? Will they have the training to provide the services needed? Will they develop relationships with students that's necessary for growth and change? Bring those people in to take over test coordination and 504, but not to do the school counselor's job. Unfortunately, if you eliminate the school counselor mandate, you open the door for schools to reduce or eliminate school counseling programs.
Thank you, Ms. Rock. Mr. Belser?
Members of the board, Superintendent White, my name is Chris Belser, and I'm a middle school counselor at a charter here in Baton Rouge. I'm here to urge you to reconsider this proposal regarding counselor ratios. Lots of agencies put staffing requirements such as this one in place as safeguards and as minimum standards of care. For example, Louisiana requires that daycares for school-age children have a certain number of staff members for a certain number of children, and nursing homes have requirements, hospitals have requirements. In today's newspaper, Superintendent White asked readers to reconsider that variables such as age, affluence, and population density make it difficult to create universal mandates such as the counselor staffing ratio. Research would contend that emotional behavior issues don't discriminate based on age, income, or zip code. Research would also contend that students in every grade, every school, and every community need someone to assist with career awareness and development. Currently, Louisiana state law requires guidance personnel to assist all 8th grade students in completing an individual graduation plan. However, there is no BESE policy or state law regarding that there should be a school counselor in an 8th grade classroom or in an 8th grade school. Additionally, this individual graduation plan must be revisited with students, parents, and counselors in every year of high school. That alone ensures that middle and secondary school counselors will always have a role in their schools, just with that one duty. Furthermore, students in elementary grades and early middle grades need assistance in being prepared to make these decisions in 8th grade and then as they move into high school. It's also been said that this proposal gives principals and district leaders more freedom to determine the individual needs of their schools and to determine who will provide these services. I believe, like many others have said, that it opens the door for cash-strapped leaders to see this as an opportunity to make budget cuts at the expense of students. At my present job, I have to turn some students away because there are only so many hours in the day for me to work with them. And as I'm here today, I've had phone calls from parents, from administrators, and from teachers regarding some of my students. I can't stand knowing that their needs are not being met, so please don't make this a problem for more students around the state. Now, I want to ask you to do something that I asked my 6th grade students yesterday at an award ceremony. Take a moment and think for yourselves, without thinking about the opinion of the person seated next to you. Please examine the evidence laid out for you regarding the potential impact of school counselors, and please help make sure they're adequately staffed in every school. Thank you.
Ms. Barrios?
Lee Barrios, St. Tammany retired teacher. Mr. White, your description of new teachers probably does apply to TFA teachers with 6 weeks of training, no knowledge of curriculum, public ed rules, child psychology, and et cetera. Yes, they probably do need and use a script and have a rigid discipline policy. But the reality of most first-year real teachers actually often presents a very different picture. As a matter of fact, I have 3 analogies to describe the overall problem with many of these policies, rather than go into specifics about each one. The first analogy is from a Saturday Night Live Seinfeld script, when he walks into his history classroom, and I know I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but it is Saturday Night Live. There are a bunch of knockerheads. And he walks in and he dumps all their tests into a garbage can because they all failed it. Of course, they were delighted. The second analogy is of my husband who received a teaching assistantship at grad school at Ohio State. Now keep in mind, it's the 60s. He's majoring in sculpture with the long hairs. Okay, so he went to class the first day and told all his students, now we're all adults here, if you don't feel like you can attend class on any given day, that's your choice. He comes dragging home the next day, what's the matter? Well, none of my students showed up today. The third analogy, the typical new young, inexperienced teacher who learned in school, of course, that you need to empower your students. You need to make them an integral part of the decision-making process so they'll have buy-in. So the first week of school in discussing the classroom rules and policies, she breaks them up into small groups and says, I want you to design the discipline rules for this class. Well, guess what? No homework on weekends. They get to take retest unlimited number of times, no dress code, et cetera, et cetera. There is a danger in giving this option for schools and at the same time squeezing district budgets. It's already happened in St. Tammany. Yes, it was a choice, okay? But in the name of choice, their choice was rather than RIF teachers and increase class sizes, they allowed counselors and librarians who chose to go back into the classroom to fill those empty positions, and they're sharing counselors and librarians among schools so they no longer have the benefit of these full-time counselors. It is happening, it will happen, and I ask you to consider why break rules that have been developed for the benefit of the children, the safety of the children over time? Why give the option not to follow those rules? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I, before Mr. Desenthal speaks, can I just say a couple of words to the two counselors?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. First of all, it's very helpful to me to hear what you say because you're obviously, I'm taking a guess, but I think I can tell very good at what you do, and your comments have been very helpful to me. I want to make a couple of points, just maybe we can just engage in a quick conversation here. Number one, I share your concerns about administrators' ability to organize their organizations. It's not just about counselors, it's about all staff within, and there aren't enough classroom teachers, counselors, et cetera, that have adequate structures and processes within our schools. You're right, the Compass rubric kind of points at an aspiration, but we're not even remotely there. So I want to acknowledge that I think your comment there is right on. My personal view is rules only encourage limited management development because they don't allow people, they don't allow people to think for themselves. And that's a view that backs this. But just a couple of thoughts about our circumstances here. A couple of things you said, I think, drive home partially why this is an important distinction to tease out. You work in a charter school. Bulletin 741, this piece doesn't cover charter schools. So actually your principal doesn't have to have you on the staff by way of a rule that exists at this board. So you're already in the position that others are advocating they're concerned about being in. But what you said is that a law says that counseling has to happen. There are multiple laws that say this. In fact, there are multiple BESE regulations that say that there are various things that counselors have to do. So while as a board you are considering a shift in a ratio that already doesn't apply in charter schools, where counselors are not being fired or laid off in droves, not even at all. There are laws that say that counseling activities have to take place of the sort that actually do cover charter schools. And I only say that people who are as obviously extraordinary at helping schools hit the goals for which they're highly accountable, whether it's graduation, whether it's levels of cohort progression, whether it's mastery of end of course tests, whether it's advanced placement progression, whether it's college admissions. Principals have demonstrated that they're keeping and nurturing those people on their staffs because schools that are deregulated, like charters, are doing that. It doesn't make the entire point. I understand we may disagree on that, but for me it actually drives home exactly why we're doing this.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
The reason I work at a charter school this year, last year I was in a public school system and I was RIF because of budget issues.
Fair point. And at the same time, the number of counselors in our state last year went up. So in tight budget times across our state, the number of counselors in our state in aggregate increased. We're in tight budget times. Counselors and classroom teachers are oftentimes experiencing reductions in force. That's why our legislature changed the law to try to make them a more rational system. I wish that would have been the case when that happened to you last year. I guess my overall point is that where we don't have these regulations around ratios. And I worked in a school system that was all charters. No school was covered by, virtually was covered by this bulletin. You didn't see a mass departure of these positions. You actually saw them being embraced because people know that they're necessary in order for them to get to their goals. I say that all the while accepting, Ms. Rock, what you say about administrator training. We need more. We need to change our preparation systems. You're right on the money.
Mr. Desautels?
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Desautels. I live in Zachary, Louisiana. I'm a retired educator, and I'm here simply as an educator and as a taxpayer. And I'd like to say that I do support, in reviewing these changes, I do support maintaining the counseling positions as a required, and the same thing with the librarian and physical education. I cannot imagine, with obesity being the biggest problem we have in our schools today, health-wise, for us to reduce physical activity, which is what this would do. And when school systems have budget problems, they'll cut. But I'm here to talk to you about two other sections, and if you look at your notes, Section 311 and 315 have to do with repeal of accreditation of schools. I cannot imagine what we would replace the accreditation of schools with if that's done away with. It's very important for maintaining a good, solid, well-rounded, comprehensive school, and I think we need to continue with our school accreditation. When we do away with something like school accreditation, what we're doing is we're narrowing the focus of our schools. And what teachers are telling me, and I write a blog, by the way, for educators, and I get a lot of feedback. What teachers are telling me is that they're tired of focusing everything on preparing kids for tests. There are a lot of other things that we need to do in the school, and when you do school accreditation, it does cover those other areas. The other section that I'm concerned about is Section 907 and 909, having to do with giving Carnegie unit credit, where you're giving an option of either spending the time in class and passing the tests that the teachers give, or just passing one test, or just having a portfolio of materials. I think that's a big mistake. I taught lab courses. I taught chemistry and physics. I can assure you my kids needed to be in class. No way could they take that course and do a good job just taking a test at the end of the year. And the problem is this, Superintendent White, it's unintended consequences. I think the motivation for this change is good, but I think the unintended consequences are much greater in that pressure will be brought on teachers. Right now, the effort is to get as many kids to graduate as possible from every school, no matter what, because you're being rated that way. And what's happening now with, for example, with the credit recovery courses, tremendous pressure is being put on teachers to just give kids a credit. Just give it to them so we can graduate them, so that we can move our graduation rate up. And that will double and triple if you remove the time requirement and just allow a test or a portfolio of materials. And I expressed to Superintendent White 2 months ago about my concern about the course choice program. This program will definitely abuse this privilege because they will be the only ones that will decide whether a kid gets credit. So it's a very dangerous situation. I understand the intent, but I think the unintended consequences are wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desautels. The next group that we have coming up are Michael Falk, Andrea Martin, Lee Meyer, and Dr. Charles Michel.
Could I, Madam Chairman, just clarify for the board some of the policy positions Mr. Desautels took? I think that on the physical education, the evidence shows that there is no correlation between states that do or do not have this policy and obesity. 4 of the top 5 least obese states in our country have this policy, and the nation's most physically fit state, which is Oregon, also has this policy. So in fact, there's every evidence to show that the states that are doing well in these metrics actually have this specific policy in place that we're talking about. Accreditation, the regulations say that the department will engage in an annual review of every school in our state. We have 1,300 schools. This is a bureaucratic morass that will not lead to an in-depth review of the kind of aspiration that Mr. Desatel, I think you state. And look, if there were every capacity in the world to do it well, then perhaps it could be done. But in the end, it ends up driving bureaucracy. And it was created in a time when there weren't measurements around results. We're shifting toward measuring results, not inputs. A technical clarification on the time question, which is 909. The length of the school year is in statutes. There is a prescribed minimum number of minutes in statutes. So all that we're saying in this regulation is that school systems have the ability to determine the length of the school day, and thus how many days do you need to meet that number of minutes. We're not getting rid of any minimum requirement in terms of the number of minutes. The law says there's 63,000 some minutes. And with respect to course grading, there was a problem, I would say, in this state on the rigor of course grading. And Mr. Desatel and I share our, I think, concerns about the subjectivity of course grading. We have created a gate in our state, which is end of course tests. So that, let's just say you are passed on your English 1 test, and let's say, whether it's through seat time or not, as Mr. Desatel says, it was an inappropriately not rigorous grade. Well, now in our state, you have an English 2 end of course test that gates that student and effectively says if you can't pass an English end of course test, you don't graduate from high school, which is that a focus on results has effectively replaced the focus on micromanaging inputs. So I respect, as you said, the motivations for what you're saying. I just wanted to clarify some of the policy points from our perspective.
There are courses that do not have end of course tests required by the state, and those are the ones I'm mainly concerned about.
Mr. Falk?
Thank you, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Since I represent 70 superintendents, does that give me 210 minutes?
No, they didn't turn in any other cards.
Okay. For years, superintendents have asked the department to address Bulletin 741, and we have been doing it piecemeal. Now we've taken the approach, rather than biting off a chicken leg, we've gone to an elephant leg, because we have a tremendous amount of changes that are being proposed. The main focus of our asking the department to look at it was to go through there and eliminate things that were no longer applicable, that we were having to live under those guidelines. Secondly, to provide flexibility in the management of school systems, since the management of school systems has changed over the years with school accountability, now with teacher effectiveness, school performance scores, you have the Common Core, you have the PARCC assessments. So the department went through, they looked at the potential items that would provide flexibility, they looked at the updated technical terms, and you've heard specific instances today. Now, I represent 70 superintendents. I consider it an honor, but also consider it a challenge, because they're pretty opinionated people, and they all deal with different situations in their districts, and they have to face those situations on a daily basis. So when I speak for the group, there are some who support bits and pieces of the policy recommendation, and there are others who would rather leave it alone. The issue's been brought up about counselors, and it's been brought up about librarians. And when you take a look at the comprehensive counseling, 1125, the word that's been changed went from shall to recommended. If you look at the rest of that provision, there are still services that schools must provide to students. Those services will continue to be provided. Superintendents have sent me information. Mr. Falk, we believe that counselors are important. We're going to maintain the counselors we have. I added 2 school counselors this year, one in the elementary school, one in the middle school. In order to expand services, I contracted out with a professional firm to provide services to children. Okay? In the librarian, the libraries have changed. You no longer have the volume of books that are required. Students can access research information, information for papers, information for classes. They can go on the internet. They can access. They do it better than some of us do. With the issue of PE, some school superintendents wanted that flexibility. I would say that if it's not a course that's incorporated into the daily schedule with guidelines, with content matter, and with learning targets, it should not be offered and it should not be given credit. I personally do not feel an after-hours course should receive credit in the area of physical education, and I think the department has streamlined that. So I would ask you to look at the overall impact that these policies have, realizing that maybe we need to come back. Maybe we need to really focus on the comments that you get during the period of notice of intent, and that you carefully weigh those comments before you offer final approval.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Ms. Martin?
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm Andrea Martin, Executive Director for the Louisiana Association of Principals, and I really appreciate Superintendent White saying, give the money to the principals and let them decide what they want. Well, you should have let me talk first. I could have told you exactly what they want. I represent over 1,100 principals and assistant principals, and I told them to call you after they called me and emailed me. I don't know if they were able to get you or not, but I can tell you the ones that were able to get me all said, we need our counselors and our librarians. Our students need those services. We cannot do without those services. The value that we have talked about today is our students, and we all want them to go to college. We all want them to be successful. We want them to be mentally stable. We don't want any suicides on our campuses. The counselors are talking about all the activities, all the things that they're responsible for. I did not have one principal call me and say, I can do without the school counselor and the librarian. They didn't even mention some of the other things. They said, we'll work around it, whatever. Now, they are all smart enough, too, to know that if you take away the ratio, that if you can have one counselor for 2,000 children or 1,500 students, you're not going to get many services out of it. The only thing that we don't control is the money. Superintendent Falk, school board, they've all talked about the fact that the money is going to be tight. It's going to be tight. They're going to have to cut something. They're just asking, don't cut our school counselors and our school librarians. Those are the things that help our students be successful.
Who, just out of who is it who would be cutting them?
I beg your pardon?
Who is it, you said don't cut them, but who is it who would be cutting them?
The counselors and the librarians?
Yeah.
They don't want the principals. Principals and assistant principals do not want the counselors and the librarians to be cut. And they don't want to cut the ratio.
Who is it who would cut? Who is it who would cut them?
I would think the school board would if they didn't have enough money, because they will tell you, contrary to popular belief, I mean, the principal works with the school board and with the superintendent, but they say how many teachers you're going to get. The school board will make those decisions, and the superintendents, they will make those decisions, and they will tell you whether or not you will have enough money. Maybe you can have a counselor and you won't be able to teach Algebra 1. Don't just leave that policy out of the mix. Just leave your counselors and your librarians alone, because students need them. And we all know money's going to be tight. Somebody's going to be cut somewhere.
Does that conclude your comments? Because you had a little more time before the superintendent asked the question.
Well, there are a lot of places that do not have elementary counselors now, and that's a shame. There are some school districts that are fortunate enough that they have enough money that they have elementary counselors, but many of them don't. But as I said,
can you give us names of places that don't? Because that's not been my experience.
That do not have them?
Thank you.
Wynn Parish doesn't have them. I don't think Natchitoches Parish has them.
Okay. Thank you.
A lot in North Louisiana. We just don't have elementary counselors.
Okay.
But they do. You don't have them either? But counselors are needed, and so are your librarians.
Thank you. Does that conclude your comments? I want to make sure everybody gets their time. Dr. Michelle?
Hi there. My name is Dr. Charlie Nichelle, and I'm the Supervisor of Special Education in Lafourche Parish, and I'm here representing LUSIA, the Louisiana Association of Special Ed Administrators. There are a couple of comments that are being proposed for Bulletin 741 as regards to special ed, and we have a couple of disagreements with them that we'd like you to consider. I do have handouts for you. I'll give you after for your consideration afterwards. Section 331D. We agree that the language of this section should be clarified, but disagree with the changes made. The changes proposed by the department read, children who have been receiving special education in another state or in another school system within Louisiana and have an IEP in effect from the previous system shall be provided FAPE based on the exceptionality. We believe there are two significant problems with the proposed language. The language shall be provided FAPE based on exceptionality is completely inaccurate and is a flagrant violation of IDEA. Under no circumstances can FAPE be determined based on the category of a student's exceptionality. Please refer to the following federal regulations. That is, each child's educational placement must be determined on an individual case-by-case basis depending on each child's unique educational needs and circumstances, rather than by the child's category of disability, and must be based on the child's IEP. Number two, the proposed language also eliminates any reference to the procedure outlined in Bulletin 1706 regarding students who have been receiving special education in another state. Section 323F of Bulletin 1706 states that when such a student transfers from another state, the new public agency shall provide FAPE until the new public agency either conducts an evaluation pursuant to sections 305 through 307, if determined to be necessary by the new public agency, and develops, adopts, and implements a new IEP, if appropriate, that meets the applicable requirements in sections 320 through 324. The language proposed by the department indicates that students with IEPs from another state will be provided FAPE in Louisiana, period. In reality, they are provided FAPE until they are evaluated, and FAPE ends if the new Louisiana evaluation reveals that they do not meet Louisiana eligibility criteria. This frequently happens with students who have been classified as having a specific learning disability, as many states have eligibility criteria very different from Louisiana's. In Section 903B, the proposed change eliminates the following language. Reasons for selecting a more restrictive environment may not be based solely on category of disability, severity of disability, availability of educational or related services, administrative convenience, or special equipment. Refer to Bulletin 1706, Subpart A, Regulations with Students with Disabilities. While the remaining language does mirror federal and state regulations, we believe that the omission of the above clarifying language is not a positive change. We realize that the department is attempting to take redundant information out of Bulletin 741, especially when more detailed information is available in other bulletins such as 1706 and 1508. Our concern, however, is that campus administrators tend to rely on Bulletin 741 as a primary reference document. It is our experience that principals rarely, if ever, use Bulletin 1706 or the federal IDEA regulations as a reference. If the information in Bulletin 741 is incomplete or misleading, we are creating the possibility of students with disabilities being inadvertently denied their legal rights. We ask that the clarifying language previously in Section 903B remain.
Ms. Allen is right behind you, and she'll go ahead and get that handout from you and pass it out to members of the board while we have the next group of public comments come up. Mr. Meyer, does this mean you do not want to comment?
I stand in opposition, and I'm sorry to disappoint, but they covered it pretty well.
Okay, that's fine with me. Mr. Scott Richard, Wayne Free, Mary Patricia Ray, Carnell Washington, and then Rudy Macklin, if Rudy made it back.
Could I ask a question, please? I reached my BESE board member. I always know how to call him. I've called him in the past. But when you have the telephone numbers listed for BESE members, sometimes when people will say, what is my BESE member's telephone number? And I looked on your website, and several were 225 that didn't live in Baton Rouge. Is that an answering machine?
That would be our BESE office where they can call and leave a message for the BESE member to get back in touch with them.
Okay, so they can
So
call
we don't have satellite offices or anything like that.
Okay.
So.
Board members, let me just share one piece of follow-up on the last comment. I thought that the piece about students transferring and their access to FAPE in light of students transferring was right. And I think the board should consider that and perhaps a correcting language on that specific point, which I thought was right on the money.
And I think your department actually recognized that. And so, I'm out of order.
You're out of order. While we're waiting for the next group to get settled, I just wanted to let you know that Jennifer Daygrew, Barry Burnside, Mike LaForte, Karen Russo, Debbie Lang, Paul Caesar, Cindy Nardini, and Jared Daygrew all opposed the recommendation but didn't have comments. This is our last group of speakers. We'll go ahead and start with Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Ms. Brophy, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. Based on the recent testimony that we've heard today and the discussions that have occurred at Superintendent's Advisory Council and in discussions with other educational stakeholders, we'd highly suggest and recommend a proper and thorough vetting through the medium of the public hearing process that is part of the administrative code on this matter, or a deferral and reconvening all of the stakeholders to bring more input to these issues before any final decision is made. It appears that some of these measures have the appearance of causing divisiveness and miscommunication amongst educational stakeholders. School boards do not want more divisiveness and miscommunication among employees and stakeholders. We want harmony for the simple reason that we're charged with providing education to students and children in Louisiana. Therefore, we would hope for clearer communication and valued input from those closest to the students prior to proceeding with final approval on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Mr. Free.
Wayne Free, Louisiana Association of Educators. I've got to tell you, I miss Cecil Picard more every day. His willingness to engage each and every group in the process didn't mean we always agreed, but it meant we felt that we were engaged and involved in going through the process to make sure that all data and all information was provided. I appreciated Mr. White's comments this morning about how much this school's state's scores have grown. I wish he had mentioned that 75% of that occurred during Cecil's time, not in the last 3 years. I appreciate him saying how much he appreciates and is concerned about teachers and administrators and superintendents and board members in these states, but why won't they ask about these policies on an in-depth basis? There's an awful lot in here. It needs to be looked at very closely. And I believe that boards and superintendents and principals need the ability to make decisions. That's why we provide waivers on each and every one of these processes. Put this back in the hopper, tell him to do his due diligence, and let's get this done right.
Ms. Ray?
Mary Patricia Ray with the Louisiana Federation of Teachers. I think we've heard some pretty inconsistent statements today, and unfortunately we've been the recipients of some pretty inconsistent policies. We've heard a lot of talk about how BESE's role and the department's role need to change, and the scope of their role needs to become smaller or different. But the fact of the matter is that our state constitution, as well as the laws of our state, lay out very clearly the role of this board and the role of the department. And it's your role to set standards and also to align resources so that our educators and our support staff and our administrators can meet those standards. The proposed changes that are before you allow for an ill-conceived response to the fiscal starvation of our public schools instead of addressing the problems that are created by 5 years of freezes to the MFP and the funneling of monies from public schools to course providers, scholarship schools, and virtual schools. These suggestions allow school boards to make cuts that, simply put, hurt our students. This board must take a balanced approach to improving our public schools. These policies represent flexibility solely in that they give school boards just enough rope to hang themselves. This policy is purported to cut red tape, but in reality, it encourages and ratifies local choices that hurt our children. These changes represent so-called freedom to cut services of counselors that help prepare our kids for tests and guide them as they become career and college ready. It provides excuses to local school districts to cut quality in the midst of overwhelming budget woes, instead of providing the support and encouragement to continue to advocate for the best outcomes for our students. And that's the real duty of this board. And that's why we're here today, to represent our members and all the students they teach, to urge this board to delay this vote until a more balanced set of policies that address the underlying causes of the need for so-called flexibility have been presented to you. You are the last line of defense between our students and the devastating effects that cutting quality of services has on them. Please do not hide behind a shield of flexibility. It's your duty to reject these changes.
Mr. Cornell?
Cornell
Mr. Washington, I'm sorry.
No problem. Cornell Washington, President of East Baton Rouge Federation of Teachers, and a retired teacher here in East Baton Rouge for about 35 years. A lot of things have been said here today in reference to the changes that are being presented. But in reality, what this is just a lot of bandages being put on a bleeding wound, and it's not going to fix anything. I don't recall in my 40 years in education, probably 42 years totally being involved, very seldom can I recall where every aspect of the educational family have stood together. Superintendent's Association, Principals Association, School Board Association, teachers, counselors, what have you, Principals Association. We are the educational experts that know what affects our children. And we all say this is terrible. It's too much being thrown together. Again, the administration is coming together, putting together, just stackpiling a whole lot of stuff and trying to rush it down people's throat. We recommend that this need to be broken out and looked at and allow the educational community to come together and bring them in on the beginning. So often, coming into this room, so many ideologues come up without research, just say, this is what we need to do. I taught history in my classroom. Even today, I heard it suggested that a child could walk into my history classroom and wouldn't know more when he walked out. That's a lie. I would challenge any child, whatever you think you know, I'm going to take you to another level. And if anyone in this room had a child to come into your classroom and you taught him and he or she did not know any better than you, was a sorry teacher. So to say that is ridiculous to us. At the time when the social problems in our society are so high, we are talking about cutting guidance counselors? Guidance counselors? At the time when our children don't read, we're talking about getting rid of librarians and opportunity for them to read? That doesn't make sense to me. I know right here in Baton Rouge, since we have put guidance counselors into our elementary schools, attendance rate improved. These people provide antisocial behavior workshops for our students. Many of our kids come to school with all kinds of social ills. These people get to them first because they are there every day. And then to suggest, me being a coach for 35 years, and a great one at that, to suggest that any old class should equal to a unit in PE, anything after school, I totally disagree with that, because it is all about winning. The gentleman who spoke earlier, we don't teach proper fitness, we teach winning if I'm a coach. So I think we're trying to do too many things together at the expense of our children. Everyone in this room knows it's about money. And our children, I'm closing now, and our children will suffer if you get rid of guidance counselors, if you're talking about looping all this stuff together at their expense. It's time for this state and your job, board, is to make sure our children do not suffer because we refuse to properly fund education.
Did Rudy Macklin make it back? Did Rudy Macklin make it back? Thank you. Board members, I will entertain a motion at this point. Before I do, I just want to reiterate for some people who may not have been here for our December meeting that this policy was actually deferred in December and is being heard for the second time by our board.
Madam Chairperson, I move to make a motion. I would like to pull section 331 regarding special education programs and move to approve it as amended by the language presented at this meeting, which I believe the board has in front of them.
Are there any board members that do not have that language in front of them?
It was passed out at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
331. Do you have it?
So if you look for section 331 language.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
I might have a question.
Well, I have a motion on the floor by Ms. Orange Jones. It was seconded by Ms. Hill, and I'll
No, not second by Ms.
listen
Hill.
to.
By me.
I'm sorry, second by Ms. Dastug. I'll take questions by Ms. Beebe and Ms. Hill. Yes, you may offer a substitute motion.
Offer substitute motion to reject the department's recommendation for approval for Bulletin 741 because I believe it is the framework that we should use to operate our schools. That's my motion. Substitute motion. I'd like to offer a substitute motion to reject the department's recommendation for approval of Bulletin 741. All items to reject, and that we maintain the framework of Bulletin 741.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Ms. Hill.
Is there any discussion?
Object.
Yes.
We need to discuss it.
Yes. Is there discussion? Ms. Hill?
Okay, my first question is, the revisions that we just received from one of the BESE staff, was this information provided to the public in time for them to look at this information? Because if it was just provided to me, I'm quite sure the public has not had the opportunity to look over the new revisions that has been given to us. So Superintendent White, my question to you is, as the department and being the superintendent of this department, why are we giving information in a lack of time, and the public don't even have the opportunity, who we serve, to even have to look at this information, to even come back and articulate to us what they think?
Ms. Hill, I think you know, because you've done it in past meetings, that a member can always introduce an amendment to a motion at a meeting. If it's passed, it then gets put on notice of intent.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the information that we just received. According to what I received in this booklet, we just received information from a BESE staff that the language is totally different than what's in this booklet. So my question to you is...
I believe that is language that members intend to adopt in response to comments that have been made. That is my understanding, that members are introducing. It is not the department. It would require members to introduce an amendment, a substitute motion, as you and others do all the time.
I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
I think I do.
And I'm just going to just make this clear. I just think that is a lack of responsibility as a board. When we have a critical issue such as this, when we're looking at school counselors, when we're looking at librarians, when we're looking at, PE teachers and et cetera, I think it's a lack of responsibility on us that here we are at a critical point, not only in the nation, but especially in the state of Louisiana, that we receive information that is so critical for our children. It's not about Carolyn, it's not about these other people, it's about our children, that we get information, and even with the changes that's at hand, that they don't have the opportunity to even look at that language. That's the point that I would like to make.
I think what you're actually observing is that members have listened to the feedback over the course of the last several weeks and are considering alternate language to that which was originally presented because they've heard the feedback. That happens at every meeting in response to feedback, and I would add that I think you've done it many times. It would then be followed by the notice of intent process. That's not a criticism of you, it's just to say it's standard operating procedure.
Okay, and I'm just not trying to have a debate here with you, Superintendent, but I would like to look at the audience and what is on board docs from the department. These people came and poured their hearts out in what they believe should have been changes. Some of the language that we was just provided, some of this could have been eliminated if they would have had the opportunity to know what information was provided to the board. And to, no disrespect to you, Superintendent White, I just think that we do that as a board. Do I think it's right? No. Do I think a lot of things that we do is right? No. But I just think that when you're dealing with a critical issue, as far as 741 with all these different changes, we should at least allow the public to at least have the opportunity to understand the change. And even as a BESE rep, I just received this. And so some of the languages in I have questions about, but that's here nor there. I'd like to agree with BB substitute motion, and we can move forward.
Ms. Orange-Jones?
I just wanted to speak to the motion that was initially on the table.
Okay, can we deal with the substitute motion first, Ms. Orange-Jones?
Absolutely. I was wondering whether, I want to clarify whether or not it helps to read the changes being proposed so that so that it is actually public. I reserve the right to.
I will go ahead and have you read this if you would like to do that, Ms. Orange-Jones.
I feel as a board member, I reserve the right to make a substitute motion, but I do agree with Ms. Hill's concern about the public being able to understand what the motion is.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually and a lot of this has come from really thoughtful feedback from special education advocacy groups who have thoughtfully sort of recommended a few changes that enable us to further clarify what this policy is actually intended to mean. So should I read it from the top?
Well, I would think that it would help if we put it in context by saying that what section you're referring to, and also what letter, and if you could read it as you would like for it to be written in the notice of intent.
Okay, so this would be section 331.
Yes, ma'am.
D. Children who have been receiving special education in another state or in another state system within Louisiana and have an IEP in effect from the previous system shall be provided FAPE until the following conditions occur. 1, if the student is transferring from another state, eligibility is determined and a new IEP is developed if appropriate. And 2, if the student is transferring from within Louisiana, the current IEP is adopted or a new IEP is developed.
Thank you, Ms. Orange-Jones. Mr. Lee, did you have comment about the substitute motion? Does anyone else on this side have comment about the substitute motion? Mr. Garvey?
Yes, ma'am. And I'm not sure exactly where to start because this is a big issue. But let me try starting with the fact that we, as a board, require a lot of plans for a lot of proposed actions. One example is we require a thick set of plans for people who apply for charter schools. We don't just hand out charter schools to anybody. We don't just say they are probably going to have the best interests of children at hand, so let's just let them run with it. But that seems to be what we're doing here today with this proposal. We're throwing out a huge set of changes, and we're saying, or certain members of the board are saying, it's going to be okay because we have accountability and everybody has the best interests of children at hand. But that doesn't follow with what we have done in other instances, and I think that what we have done in other instances in requiring plans is good, and I think it would be good to do that here. I'm not exactly sure that my intentions is to defeat this whole proposal, but I do think that we ought to add some kind of a requirement that before we just waive all of these rules that have been in place for a long time, that we have presented to us or to some authority some sort of plan as to what it's going to be substituted with. Is it possible that there may be a better way to provide library services than what we are providing today? I think there probably is. But I think I would like to have some kind of information about what it is that a school system would be proposing before I just say, go ahead, go out and do whatever it is that you want. So I'm against the proposal as it is right now, and will probably vote for the substitute motion because of that, because I don't think that an amendment that I would propose would get passed. That's my piece.
I believe Mr. Nakan wanted to speak, and then I'll go to Mr. Romer.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd just like to begin. I don't even know where to begin, to be honest, because we've sat here for so long listening to comments. I've looked through this over the past few nights, trying to figure out where to start with. And as a student, I mean, I kind of compare it back to class. If we walk into class and the teacher gives us a million different topics to talk about, and we go through each and every one without adequate time to understand, and she gives us a test at the end of the class, we're going to fail on several instances. I think that coming from the student's perspective, I would like to postpone or to reject the way it is now, and if changes need to be made on an individual basis, because I have comments on counselors, librarians, summer school, credit, early childhood education, accreditation, PE, and on and on. How can we ever make it all in one, all in one term? And I mean, for instance, I'll make about the counselors, for instance. Our motto is for the children. If we want to be I represent 700,000 students, roughly. I mean, that's a big burden on an 18-year-old. But I do it proudly. And I'm listening intently to everyone and all the people in the state. But if it's for the children, if it's for us, and we don't have adequate counselors in the schools, then we're finding ourselves. I mean, personally, the new year, I'm graduating in a few months. And I realized what I really want to do in life, is it what I've always thought about doing as a chiropractor? It's changed a lot. You can ask my principal and my parents. It's changed a lot. But in the last few weeks since we've been back at school, I've talked to my counselors on several instances to see my career options, whether if engineering at LSU is what I need to do, or if it's the Air Force, or on and on. Without the tools that these counselors provide, I'd be lost. And yes, we do have the internet to look up stuff. But a lot of times, the internet is filled with fluff and things that maybe it doesn't work sometimes for some things. And I think as counselors, for instance, this is on a simple term as a student. The students rely on the counselors. The counselors help the schools to improve school performance scores, which in turn improve districts, and which in turn increase money and success down the road. And if we want students to come out of school prepared for the world, and not just in counselors, but in all these changes, if we want students to excel in the state, excel in the country, and excel in the world, we're not helping us. I mean, if we're not given the tools or able to make these decisions or have people guide us, then what are we doing? Because eventually, as students, if we are given the proper tools, the proper counselors, the proper classes, librarians, and all these research, we can become successful people in our world. And if we can become successful people in our world, we're going to want to give back to the schools, the districts, and the state that helped us get there. I mean, I want to do it myself, and there's several other classmates, and people do it and be philanthropists to help education. But it starts today. Without the education that I've received and the counselors and the librarians and all these different things, I would not be here today. Honestly, I would not be on this board today serving you guys and serving the students, because the school has given me the ability to be here. And I think that by moving too fast is not a good idea. We learn the opposite in school. You need to do your research. You need to find, because sometimes the reactions can be negative, and we do not want that, because it's us that are at stake. It's all the students that are at stake and our future. So please consider not moving too fastly with this, and if changes need to be made and submitted by districts or whoever, we make that on an individual basis, because we're moving way too fast, and it scares me. It actually scares me. And that's what, thank you for the comment.
Mr. Romer.
I appreciate everyone's patience here today and input and everyone's perspective. You know, I'm not a fan of Bulletin 741. I think it inhibits us. I think it becomes prescriptive. I think it becomes a crutch. I think it gives us a false sense of security, that as long as we're doing what's in Bulletin 741, we're doing a good job. That's not a fact. If that was a fact, we wouldn't have problems right now in this state. If Bulletin 741 solved our problems, we wouldn't be here today. What we have in this problem is a multi-layered question. How do we meet the individual needs of individual students across a state of diverse population, of diverse backgrounds, of urban and rural, How could we have the audacity as a state to believe we can come up with a single rule that's appropriate for every environment and every child? If we could, we wouldn't have a problem today. Bulletin 741 drives me crazy. We ought to get rid of the whole thing. Now, not one suggestion.
That one don't count.
Not one suggestion today says we ought to fire a counselor. Not one suggestion today says we ought to get rid of Jim. Not one suggestion today says we ought to get rid of a librarian. In fact, it says the opposite. It says all these things are important, and we don't do any of them well right now. We don't do any of them well right now. So we can keep relying on 741 to solve our problems, and they will not be solved. Or we can empower people in the school buildings and in the districts to make decisions for themselves and quit looking for the state to solve your problem, because we cannot solve it. Bulletin 741 inhibits growth of leadership. Bulletin 741 keeps leaders from making decisions. Bulletin 741 becomes an excuse for inaction. Because what you can do is hold up and say, well, look, we're doing right here what it says in Bulletin 741. Bulletin 741 doesn't solve our problems, folks. 235,000 kids below grade level. We have gym requirements right now in Bulletin 741, and obesity has never been a bigger problem than it is right now. Does this bulletin solve it? No. Do I think there are people out there with better ideas than me? Yes. Do I think counselors are important? Yes. Do I think gym class is important? Yes. Do I think library resources are important? Absolutely. But do I know what's best in Tallulah? Do I know what's best in Baton Rouge? Do I know what's best in New Orleans, sitting here from this desk? I don't know how to best implement it in Tallulah. I don't know how to best implement it in Bossier. And the arguments today, while valid in spirit, are invalid in practice. Not one word in these changes says to fire or hire anyone. Not one word. And we got to make a decision in this state. Are we going to empower educators in the classroom and in the school buildings and in the local districts? Are we going to give them power to make decisions? Or are we going to continue as a state to give them a prescription of failure? That's what Bulletin 741 is, a prescription of failure. There's some risk. But there's no greater risk than standing still. No greater risk than standing still. If we stand still, we know what the result is. Failure. Now, I have great sympathy for the time that everybody puts in. In the spirit of your comments are correct. Counselors are important. Fighting obesity is important. Making sure kids have access to good reference material is critical. Why don't we empower people in their own community to take responsibility for their community and quit taking solace and comfort in Bulletin 741. Bulletin 741 doesn't work, folks. I would move or reject the substitute motion. It's time we take some risk in this state. It's time we empower some people to make decisions. You already heard of a charter school that has a counselor. It's not required to have a counselor. They made a decision that that was in the best interest of their students. I would hope that every district and every principal, I wish every principal would go to their own school board and their own superintendent and make the argument at your local community why it's important. Don't look at the state for an excuse. That's all Bulletin 741 is. I move for the rejection of the substitute motion.
Mr. Lee?
We've heard a lot of opinions from everybody. not only in the audience, but on the board itself. This is complex. No easy answers, but I do not support the motion, the substitute motion that's on the floor, because I don't like the word reject that's in the motion, and I do think there are many things in this recommendation that are good and needed. However, I don't agree with everything that's in it. So I would like to consider some changes, but for the motion itself, the substitute motion, I just have to oppose. But I want to mention a couple of things that I hadn't heard mentioned today with everybody that's spoken.
Can we deal with the substitute motion and then get back to those things, Mr. Lee?
Well, it affects the substitute motion.
If it affects the substitute motion, then go for it.
Because the substitute motion is to reject the entire proposal.
Okay. If this is, go ahead, Mr. Lee.
The two items I want to look at, then I want to mention a third. I just need a little bit of clarification. On page 88, am I understanding this to say that Montessori schools would no longer be recognized? I'm not sure what that's telling us. It says repeal, so does that mean?
No, and I want to add, and I've asked Bridget Devlin to come up for us, I want to add that a lot of the things that have been, as Superintendent Falk said, that have been changed here, probably we have touched in this meeting on 2 to 4% of them. This bulletin was posted 2 months ago for public comment in advance of the last meeting. There was significant discussion, then it was deferred, so it was posted for another month, considered again. So while I respect the spirit of Mr. Nakhan's comments, and I respect pretty much everything you say, Mr. Nakhan, I have to disagree with him, to be honest, that it is in haste. The facts actually show that's not the case. So some of those pieces are so detailed because they represent antiquated policies and terms.
Okay.
That's most of what this is just things that are outdated, aren't in use, are redundant, et cetera. This is one of them. So Bridget, why don't you discuss it?
So the reason that we are removing Chapter 35, which starts on page 88, is because it does not belong in this bulletin.
Okay.
The policies retained in here are what the Montessori Association decides.
But it is covered some other way.
It is covered by the Montessori School
Okay.
Association,
That's all right.
and
That's
they
all-
provide the
and that's all I'm
accreditation as a
asking.
Montessori school.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
Okay.
All right, then on page 21, I'm a bit reluctant to comment on this. This is really controversial. I'm going to read. This is under. It's down toward the last quarter under 505, certification of personnel under item A. Just listen at this wording that's here and is proposed to be left here this way. To be eligible legally for teaching. Then it says administrator, supervisor, or other personnel services in the public schools of Louisiana. Well, to me, that wording says every public school in the state of Louisiana, personnel shall hold a valid Louisiana certification appropriate to the services rendered. Now that sounds very inconsistent to me, because charter schools are public schools. I'm wondering, this is where it gets dangerous, I'm wondering if it's time to reconsider our certification requirements and restrictions for what we normally call public schools. This is not proposed in this bulletin. Well, I'm telling you, if it's good, and if we support it, why do we have such a difference? I'm not particularly looking for quick answers. I'm just merely expressing that this is a big area, and this language is so specific and local. I hate to use the word normal, but it sounds like we have to differentiate with what public schools are. School systems have to follow this specifically because it's in Bulletin 741. Now, Mr. Roman, I might agree, maybe we need to do away with 741, but at least I'm just inviting that we think about different types of certifications or teaching requirements or something for the future. The other, my last area, since I'm stirring the water well, on page...
Well, just for clarification, that's the current language, isn't it?
It is
That's
the
in the
current
policy.
language, and it's proposed to be left that way.
Yes, okay.
I have real heartburn about the staffing ratios, particularly for counselors. I think we all know that children need more counseling than ever.
Yes.
They're going to need it even more so in the future. We all support counseling services, and it gives me a bit of a dilemma. I agree with flexibility. I want flexibility. But then I believe that as school systems have to pick up more and more mandated costs with higher insurance costs, higher retirement costs, and other things, and we're not giving them more money, they're going to have to find ways to cut. Now, it's not going to be desirable that they cut counselors, but what are they supposed to cut? How are they going to manage their school systems? If we don't leave these ratios in place and the requirements in place, I think it's going to, for the future, invite school boards and superintendents, and that's who will make the decisions. The superintendents and the school boards, not the principals and not the counselors. But it's going to invite them to reduce the number or the counseling services that I think are so critically needed and that we have supported so strongly. So I don't really support that part of this recommendation, even though I'm not willing to vote for the motion to just reject the whole thing. I don't like that word reject, and I don't think it all should be rejected.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Bradford, and then Ms. Beebe, I'll let you close before we vote.
I have been very patient. My hand was up before Ms. Bradford, and so I'm
Okay,
asking.
okay. You need to close as the maker of the motion. Wouldn't you rather hear everybody's?
I don't have a problem with that, but I'd like to respond to Mr. Lee's concern at this time, because if he has a problem with my wording reject, I would like to maintain Bulletin 741 in its initial form prior to the recommended revisions offered to this board today. So I've removed reject, and then I would be...
So is this a substitute, another substitute motion?
No, it's not. I will revise my substitute motion to eliminate the word reject, if that's his issue. That we maintain Bulletin 741 in its initial form to exclude the recommendations offered to us today to address. Got it.
So you had just amended your substitute motion. Is this okay with Ms. Hill, who seconded the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Bradford?
This is the second time this information has come before us. Through all the vetting that happened prior to that last time, then this time, there have been changes that have been made. I think that we could do this again every month, and we would end up in the same place for the most part, because there are not always going to be agreement when we start looking at the big picture of what to do across our state. I think we are all in agreement that we are all interested in what's best for children.
No, you need to.
And I don't think, I know that sometimes you insinuate that maybe we aren't, but I know that you know that we are. I think we have spent a lot of time trying to think through these issues, trying to come up with agreeable language, trying to really be receptive, and at the same time, effective in coming with a policy that would indeed return the power, the flexibility back to the local district. We may not always agree that they do the best job, but I have a lot of confidence in our local districts. I got to tell you, any school that thinks they can do without counselors or librarians or PE will not succeed. And then we have accountability to take care of that. But before that even gets to that point, every one of these still has the option of being unchanged when it goes back to the local district. And I have the hope that this will indeed give our districts the flexibility that they need to improve those areas as opposed to cutting those areas. I think that more time does not necessarily make for better policy.
Ms.
Did
Bolte?
you want to talk to Ms. Basu?
I'm going to oppose the motion, the amended substitute motion, and I appreciate all this conversation. We have probably devoted, I know I've devoted more time to this issue, preparing for this issue for this meeting than any other item, and I think we have a lot of very substantial items on the January BESE agenda. I think people made a very good point in that this board has done some very significant and hard work around counseling. I'm going to talk about counseling for a minute. Was very involved in the Louisiana
Is this
counseling
germane
model.
to the substitute motion?
I can only speak to the substitute motion. I
Please
oppose the
only
motion.
speak to the substitute motion so that I can.
Is that a
have
request?
Please.
I'll honor it.
Mr. Gio, is your comment relative to the substitute motion?
It is, and there's
Okay.
one clarification.
You can speak.
Thank you. I'm in opposition to the substitute motion, and as a point of clarification, didn't this whole 741 proposed policy come before the Superintendent's Advisory Committee?
Superintendent White, can you answer this?
It did, and I don't recall whether that was late November or early December. And it was December, and I believe it passed unanimously. Thank you.
Ms. Beebe, can you close on the substitute motion, please?
And I sure will, and based on the last comment or response to Mr. Guion, I represent 15 districts, and there are superintendents within that organization or that group, and I do know that many have expressed concern to me, and I think the greatest concern is one of maybe trust is lacking, because it's so obvious that within traditional systems we have been given a lethal injection, as I see it, and we're doomed to die at some point. And at least we have a framework in place with Bulletin 741 that we can move forward with some certainty that, well, yes, this is policy, and we don't have districts that have, in which funds have been taken away from them for whatever reason, forced choice providers or what have you. We realize moving forward there will be great competition, and we do need those services within our traditional schools. We need to maintain counselors, librarians, physical education, and it's so unfortunate that you have an opportunity as a board to ensure that we provide sound educational opportunities to all children. And I'm tired of hearing the rhetoric we want to empower educators. Educators are here today. You've received thousands of emails, I know I have, and they have communicated to you their concerns. And you're just not listening because you have this vision that that a silver bullet or some magic cure-all will occur. Well, it won't happen because I have stats that I am prepared to read to you today. We talk about education, that Louisiana ranks 49 or worse for the outcomes of our children for the past 20 years. Do you also know that Louisiana poverty rate is 19.2, the second highest in the nation and the highest in the South? That more than 31% of Louisiana children live in poverty. It ranks 48 in the nation and the highest in the South. 10% of the babies born in Louisiana are low birth weight, the second highest in the nation and highest in the South. And Louisiana has the highest percentage in the nation of families with children headed by a single parent, 35%. The southern average is 29%. The number of Louisiana in foster care under age 6 has increased by 70% since the state fiscal year 2002. 35% of children in Louisiana live with parents who do not have full-time year-round jobs. The nationally recognized Better Home Fund cited Louisiana as the state where children are the most at risk for homelessness. In Louisiana, 13% of teens ages 16 to 19 do not attend school or work. This is the second highest percentage in the nation, along with Tennessee, the highest in the South. During the 1999-2000 school year, 34% of the at-risk 4-year-olds in Louisiana were not being served by any public early childhood program. This amounts to more than 13,000 children. Louisiana has the highest juvenile incarceration rate in the nation at a cost of more than $26,000 a year for every youngster housed in the state facility.
Can I just interject?
No, in the area of mental illness, approximately 110,450 children, 10% in Louisiana, suffer from a serious emotional disorder, yet there are only 3 state hospitals that provide inpatient psychiatric treatment to children, and it goes on and on. So this is the reason, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the educators in the district, it's the statistics presented to us, and we turn away no children. Now, you want to talk about, Mr. Roman, you want to talk about the real issues? What are we going to do to solve these issues?
I would like for Ms. Ford to repeat the motion, and then I'm going to take a roll call vote, please.
Would you read the motion?
Yes, that's what she's doing.
Okay, the substitute motion as amended by Ms. Beebe, seconded by Ms. Hill, is to maintain Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, in its, and Ms. Beebe said initial form, but I'm going to ask if I can say current form, because it's really not the initial form, excluding the recommendations submitted for approval at the meeting of the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee held January 15, 2013.
Thank you. Can we take a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Beebe?
Yes.
Ms. Beebe votes yes. Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Dastug?
No.
Ms. Dastug votes no. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio?
No.
Mr. Gio votes no. Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Hill votes yes. Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Lee votes no. Ms. Orange Jones?
No.
Ms. Orange Jones votes no. Mr. Romer?
No.
Mr. Romer votes no. Ms. Bradford?
Yes. Excuse me. No.
No. Ms. Bradford votes no. You wish to vote as it is, it failed, motion fails.
I'll vote no.
7-3, motion fails.
Okay. This motion is failed. Ms. Ford, do you have something to say?
Do we?
No, ma'am, just,
Okay.
I need
Point
clarification
of order.
on the next
Point
one.
of order.
No.
Point of-
Okay.
You got to recognize the point of
Do I
order.
have to recognize? Give me a minute. All right, Mr. Lee.
It's advised.
I'm asking for a new chairman. My point
You
of-
can have one.
My point of order is there a motion on the floor?
Yes, sir.
And what is it?
We would like for Ms. Orange Jones to repeat her motion.
A motion? Go. All right. I motion, oh wait, okay. I motion that we amend item 331 as it is stated by the, as it is requested by the board, which is in front of everyone here.
So only that section of
Only that section
741.
which relates to specifically special education.
Thank you.
And I seconded that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So do we deal with that prior to pulling any other items?
Well,
As the chairperson, I would like to know if there were any other sections that you would like pulled from there, so that we can deal with any potential sections that you brought up? Or do you want to take it one section at a time?
I want to take it one section at a time because I want to make an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
But it's not this one.
That's okay. All right, so we'll take it one section at a time. Ms. Ford, can you help us?
There's 150. Do y'all realize we have 150
Okay.
sections?
There's 150 sections, so no to one section at a time. Can you tell me which section you would like to amend, Mr. Lee? And if anyone else has a section that they would like to amend, if you let me know.
I don't know what section it is, but it's the staffing
I'll help you find it.
Staffing ratios.
For staffing ratios for counselors, librarians, okay.
Counselors is 1125.
Okay, so we're pulling section 1125.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to.
Part of this motion.
Madam
Right,
Chairman,
I got that.
I'm going to pull section 2357, physical education.
2357 is pulled.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to pull 1705, school libraries.
1705 is pulled.
So I'd like to,
have a question
it would be
on
possible to entertain a motion to approve the standing recommendations?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. But what we want to do is make sure we don't have any other sections to pull before we do that. And Ms. Bradford had her hand up.
I wanted to make a comment on the
On-
motion on the table.
Okay. I would, go ahead, Ms. Duffy.
Madam Chairman, may I suggest that, that those 4 items being sort of pulled, would it be appropriate to for the chairman of the board to entertain a motion to approve the recommendations before the board, and bulletin 741 on this item, and therefore we can dispense with that section and then address those 4 items separately?
That's what I would like to do.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that whatever sections that you would like to pull are pulled. Right now, I have 1705, 2357, and 1125.
And 331.
And 331.
So let me take a stab at a motion. I move to approve.
Motion on the floor.
Oh, can I make a substitute motion, please?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a substitute motion to approve the revisions to Bulletin 741 as presented today by the department, with the exceptions of sections 331, special education programs, section 1125, comprehensive counseling, section 1705, school libraries, media centers, and section 2357, physical education.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Bradford, second. Is there any discussion about this motion? Is there any opposition? Motion carries.
No, right now.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You went so fast when you said discussion.
Okay, discussion.
Okay, just make sure that my discussion is that when you look at Bulletin 741, the 4 items that was just pulled via request by Ms. Dastu, that we're just going to look at these new revisions that has been given to us as a board. That's the revision that Ms. Dastu has recommended. But as a board member, I still think that even though revisions has been made, the community still don't know what they are. That's first and foremost. Secondly, we haven't even allowed them to even see what language has been changed.
Those are being pulled and debated, Ms. Lee.
Those items they still don't know what they are, and I'm a board member, I'm sitting here, and I still don't know what they are. And secondly, I think that we need to give the community enough time to see what has been revised as a board. And piggyback on what Superintendent White said, I proposed a policy, and he had me allow the policy to go through various channels before it even was considered. So just with that being said, I just wanted to make that point of discussion before I cast my vote.
Okay.
And I concur, I piggyback with what she said. I've just received these documents with proposed changes. I have not taken the time to read them, so I don't know what I'm voting on and voting for.
So at this point, with this motion, you're not voting for anything that's been changed. You're voting for the policy as it has been on the website since Thursday, minus the sections that were mentioned. So there were 4 sections that I count that your fellow board members would like to discuss in more detail. And as the chair, I would rather take that just 4 sections together instead of dealing with a bulletin, 150 sections of a bulletin.
Okay.
So you're not voting right now on any changes, you're only voting on something that's been there.
And with that said, there are other things that I have an issue with, so we can move forward to take the vote.
Okay. Is there opposition to the motion?
I oppose.
Motion carries.
I object.
We have
Roll call
opposition.
vote?
Sure. Ms. Ford, please.
Ms. Beebe?
I vote no.
Ms. Beebe votes no. Mr. Ben is absent. Ms. Dastug?
Yes.
Ms. Dastug votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
No.
Mr. Garvey votes no. Mr. Gio?
Yes.
Mr. Gio votes yes. Ms. Hill?
No.
Ms. Hill votes no. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones votes yes. Mr. Romer?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Ms. Bofi?
Yes.
Ms. Bofi votes yes. Motion carries.
Yes, Ms. Bradford.
On the special education programs, in this language, when the speaker came up, Superintendent, this question is really for you. There was some discussion about whether this being provided by FAPE before, is this still language that is appropriate based on that conversation?
The language,
Dr. Michelle?
is the language that Ms. Orange Jones introduced appropriate given the language that Dr. Michelle mentioned? Well, actually, no, because I think why don't I read it? Would that work, Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Okay.
I
think
just want clarification
it came
that
out,
that's correct.
the letter that you read from, I believe Ms. Orange Jones's motion comes in response to that letter. So why don't I read it? Because I think we're all trying to get to the right place on that. It says, item D, children who have been receiving special education in another state or in another school system within Louisiana and have an IEP in effect from the previous system shall be provided FAPE until the following conditions occur. 1, if the student is transferring from another state, eligibility is determined and a new IEP is developed if appropriate. Or 2, if the student is transferring from within Louisiana, the current IEP is adopted or a new IEP is developed.
Oh, wait. Mr. Chairman, you don't allow that.
Why don't we discuss our response to this, to the letter, and then if Ms. Jones needs to add language, she can.
Sure. So we received that exact letter, and these recommendations are from that letter. Basically what it says, and excuse me, I don't have it open to that section at the moment, but if a student transfers from outside of Louisiana, they will be provided FAPE while there is a new evaluation done, and then they will receive a new IEP if applicable. If they arrive from a district within Louisiana, they will again be provided FAPE while they are reevaluated, and their current IEP will either be adopted or a new one will be revised. So there are 2 different pathways, whether you're coming from within Louisiana or outside of Louisiana, and these revisions cover both of those pathways.
Thank you.
This is not me. This is not meaningful feedback. I need time to process it. I know that y'all had a conversation as recently as yesterday.
It shouldn't be allowed to discuss on that.
Ms. Orange Jones, did you want to speak to this?
I was just listening to his comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this?
I just have to agree with the gentleman that just spoke. Okay. Mr. Michelle, I just like to agree with him. Here he is having a debate, and as a constituent, he's like, I need time. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, even though it's here, and superintendent asks him a question, he responds. I mean, is that the way we conduct a board meeting or a business pertaining to our children? So I just want to just piggyback on that point.
Here's what I would suggest that we do. This was posted 2 months ago. We received a letter yesterday. our staff has moved to work with members to correct the issue that Dr. Michelle is raising. Our belief is that the language does that. I would suggest, therefore, that the board hear the language. If there's an addition that needs to be made to the language, which I think is a small tweak if it needs to be made at all, because it's a timing question, then our staff commits to working with Ms. Orange-Jones to amend the language again. I'd be happy to, but I want you to know that we've been responsive on about a 12-hour timeline on this, as this was posted for a couple of months, and we just received a letter yesterday evening. So I
would be comfortable.
I need a motion.
There is a motion.
Ms. Ford?
It falls back to the original motion, which the amended motion.
Ms.
if the
Ford
substitute
is
fails.
telling us that we need a motion, so.
Okay, well, it's Ms. Orange-Jones' motion, so.
My initial motion was that the board move to adopt the amendments put in for them, but I do agree with the superintendent's suggestion, which was to ensure that the language that I'm proposing is actually looked at from Mr. Michaud in the audience. I don't know how.
So I still don't have a motion.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So, are we asking to be able to defer this, or are we asking to approve the language as written and then to be tweaked if needed?
I'm just asking for a motion.
I would go with that. I think
Okay.
it is
All right.
possible to
Then
move
that's the
forward and
motion.
tweak if needed based on the conversations that will happen.
Okay, I didn't get the motion, please.
That the language would be adopted for 331 special education programs and tweaked for technical reliability.
As presented and amended by
As
the
presented
department.
and amended.
I second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Ms. Bradford. I have a second from Ms. Orange-Jones. Do I have discussion on this motion?
Call for the question.
Mr. Lee is called for the question. Is there opposition to this
Can we have roll call?
motion?
Roll call.
Roll call, please. They're running out of roll
Ms.
call
Beebe?
papers.
No. Ms. Beebe votes no. Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Dastu?
Yes.
Ms. Dastu votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
No.
Mr. Garvey votes no. Mr. Gio?
Yes.
Mr. Gio votes yes. Ms. Hill?
No.
Ms. Hill votes no. Mr. Lee?
No, yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Ms. Orange-Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange-Jones votes yes. Mr. Romer?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Ms. Bofi?
Yes.
Ms. Bofi votes yes. Motion carries.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to offer a motion relative to amended language for Section 1125, Comprehensive Counseling.
I will
That was mine.
hear that motion.
I'd like to, the motion is that we go back to the original language on 1125B that says each secondary school shall provide school counselors at a ratio of 1 to 450. I won't read the rest of that sentence. Under that, I would like to add sentence B1, which reads, "This provision shall not apply to schools capable of providing academic guidance, post-secondary counseling, and personal developmental support through alternative means." I'd like to add item B2 that states the LDE may request information regarding the services provided in situations where the above ratio is not being met. And as a point of clarification, under the proposed item number 4, there was a typo that should be encouraged rather than encouraged.
Do we have a second for Mr. Gio's motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Gio, a second from Ms. Dastu. Is there a discussion?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I have a
Yes,
question.
you may ask a question, Mr. Romer.
Mr. Gill, as I understand it, you're saying that if a district did not meet the suggested ratio, that the state has the right to ask, how are you meeting this need?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lee?
That might have answered my question, since I was the one that asked for this. I was a little surprised at that motion.
Just trying to help you out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I need all the help I can get. But now, as I appreciate it, the motion is that this item as it stated, not be considered except those two areas that you mentioned.
Yeah, item B1 and B2 being added.
Where did this come from? You must have. When was it passed?
And this is based on the feedback we've gotten since the notice has been out, and constituents' feedback and so forth, and this is where this amended language has come from, to appease that and try and find some common ground.
Ms. Hill, and then Mr. Nakhan.
Okay. I have a question on the revision part that we just received today. It states that, it states that individuals and group counseling service, you guys took out shall and put may be provided to students at all levels as well as to teachers and administrators and parents. So may mean either or. So if a school decides not to provide these services, they have the autonomy.
I think it's the opposite, Ms.
You're the
Hill.
opposite, it's back to shall.
We're making it a requirement. We're making it, we're not changing what's currently in there on
Okay, I didn't
item
know
B.
because I'm looking at what's on this paper.
No, I think, look at,
On this language on this paper, it says shall, and it's scratched out shall and put may.
she's talking about section C, number
Individual and group counseling.
1.
Can I,
Yes, Mr. Lee?
Yes, Bridget.
generally, I support this, but I'm a little concerned with the statement that says this provision shall not apply to schools capable of providing academic guidance, counseling services, and professional development support through alternate means. Who decides the alternate means, and who decides when they're capable? I'd like to ask the maker of the motion.
If Superintendent, if I could get some clarification on this piece from our previous discussions and the feedback you've gotten.
Well, the people who are running the schools make the decision. I mean, Mr. Lee, I think every district is different in terms of where decisions are made. I think the point is that the state does not make the decision.
Well, I see this as not removing it from the changes to 741, because this is saying they have to have counselors unless they feel like they can't afford it or don't want them or have alternate routes, and the local school boards are going to make that decision.
Well, I actually don't think that describes the entirety of what Mr. Gio has proposed, if I understand it, which is that I think what has been said is that you have to abide by the ratios. If you don't abide by the ratios, the state may check to ensure that you are adequately providing the services that the ratios intend for you to provide.
That was a reason for sentence 2, Mr. Lee.
But it states this provision shall not apply. It does not say they've got to ask for.
Well, it says, I mean, and it's semantics, we could reword it, but it says that it shall not apply if you are providing these services, meaning you're meeting the mandate of providing the services. But then it says the state may verify that you are actually doing that. And currently, there is a process by which any district can request a waiver for those provisions.
That's what I would ask. Would you consider that in item 1 here saying any deviation would require a waiver through the State Department of Education?
I would, in my view, although obviously this is board members' decision, caution the board greatly against micromanagement of that kind, because it will lead to discussions that make government or try to govern locally from afar, and that will immerse the board in this discussion about any school that wants to bring that kind of circumstance in front of the board. And in fact, I believe that board members expressed earlier their sort of chagrin at supporting a waiver to a policy before.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but to me that just reinforces that it leaves it up to the local school board to decide if they're going to have counselors or not.
We'll just drag it out.
Mr. Nakhan, have you been waiting to speak?
Yes, ma'am. I just want, kind of piggyback Mr. Lee, can you explain, because personally I'm confused and I have all this in front of me, and I know the audience is probably confused too, just exactly what 1 and 2 means, and who, is it the districts that makes that definition of capable of providing academic guidance? And if the state feels that it's not capable, that the state will ask for verification or information, is that correct? Or can I be just guided on that? It's just a question for clarification.
Yeah, as the maker of the motion, the intent is that they'll meet the requirements that are set in the policy, as most schools are now. Not every school, even though it's in policy, that doesn't mean every school is currently meeting it. But that's the intent, that they will. The item number 2 is the intent that the Department of Ed may request information if they're suspect that it's not being met, to make sure it's being met. If there's certain circumstances, item number 1 is meant to address if you have a situation where there's a district that has an alternative means, if for whatever reason they can't meet it, as a lot of districts are not meeting it now, that they propose an innovative way to address that, to ensure that the students are getting the guidance that they need. It's the intent to allow that within the system and the process.
Thank you for that clarification.
Is there any other discussion on this one?
I don't think Superintendent ever answered the question that I asked. The question was individuals and group counseling service. We had shall, but we scratched out shall and put may be provided to students at all levels as well as to teachers, administrators, and parents. So we're not requiring it now. So maybe who will be responsible if these services are needed at that school and they're not being met? So
Ms. Hill, that was already advertised that way, and I think the intent of that is all levels would mean all educational levels. The policy now doesn't require counseling at the elementary level.
Right. Or to
I think
teachers, administrators.
that, yes, that's right. And the reason is that it creates a shall that actually the policy doesn't really intend to create, which is actually not every one of the 700,000 kids must receive those services every year, which is what the shall would imply. Instead, it says may, and then it says that the services shall be available to all students, so that essentially you're saying that they don't have to be, or that was the original policy, they don't have to be provided to every student, but they will be available to every student.
and teachers, administrators, and parents. I'm just wanting to make sure I have a clear understanding. Correct?
Sorry?
I'm saying and teachers, administrators, and parents, according to what this says?
Yes, yes, yes.
Madam Chair? Madam
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
I want to muddy it a little more. I would, I move that we defer on this item.
So this is a substitute motion?
No, well, I didn't call it a substitute motion. I'm moving that we defer.
We have a motion, so I have to honor Mr. Gio's motion. So if you want a substitute motion to defer,
Okay.
then I'm going to need a second on that.
That's what I'm moving.
To defer?
Okay.
Point of order. What defer until when?
I didn't put a date on when.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
There is no date on it.
State
Until,
government will be deferred forever.
until it's brought up again.
Okay, so now we have a substitute motion to defer the discussion on section 1125. That is a motion offered by Mr. Lee, a motion that was seconded by Ms. Beebe. Is there discussion on the substitute motion?
Well, yes, I mean, I'm just concerned, but I second the substitute motion.
Well, just
But
call
the
for the
thing
question.
is, that we would be expected to provide counseling services to parents, may provide counseling services to parents,
Teachers and administrators.
teachers, administrators, and parents.
That's why it's being amended.
Okay,
Right.
let's go on with the vote.
That's why there's a
Okay.
may.
In the bulletin, then you're required to do it.
Call the question.
Okay, so we're calling the question on whether or not we're deferring on section 1125. Oh, we have to vote to call the question. I think we're ready to vote on it.
Yes,
Okay.
on the substitute motion.
Madam Chairman, Ms. Orange Jones just came in. Can you apprise her what the vote before us is?
Ms. Ford, will you repeat the motion before us?
Yes, ma'am.
Substitute motion by Mr. Lee, seconded by Ms. Beebe, to defer consideration of the proposed revisions to Section 1125, comprehensive counseling, contained in Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook of School Administrators.
Yes, we'll do a roll call.
Ms. Beebe?
As the second to the motion, yeah.
Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Dastu?
No.
Ms. Dastu votes no. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio?
No.
Mr. Gio votes no. Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Hill votes yes. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
No.
Ms. Orange Jones votes no. Mr. Romer?
No.
Mr. Romer votes no. Ms. Bradford?
No.
Ms. Bradford votes no. Ms. Bophy?
No.
Ms. Bophy votes no. Motion fails.
So we're back to Mr. Gio's motion to amend Section 1125. Is there any more discussion on
I'd
this
like to
one?
call for the question.
Mr. Lee would like to call for the question, so I think we have to take a vote to call the question.
All in favor? Say all in favor.
Ms. Ford is mad at you.
Okay, we need 2/3 vote to call the question. Ms. Beebe?
You could ask if there's any objection.
Is there any objection to calling the question? Okay, so back to the original motion.
Back to the original motion. We'll take a roll call.
Okay. Ms. Beebe?
I'm struggling with this.
Say yes or no.
I guess yes.
Ms. Beebe votes yes. Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Bophy? I'm sorry, I'm back to these old sheets because we ran out of the new sheets.
I vote yes.
Yeah,
I vote yes.
Ms. Dastu?
Okay, we're voting on Mr. Gillo's
Yes,
motion,
ma'am.
correct?
For 1125.
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
No.
Mr. Garvey votes no. Mr. Gio?
Yes.
Mr. Gio votes yes. Ms. Hill?
No.
Ms. Hill votes no. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones votes yes. Mr. Romer?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. Ms. Bradford? Yes. Mr. Bradford votes yes. Motion carries.
Board, you had two more sections that you asked to pull. Those are Section 1705 and Section 2357.
I move that we, BESE amend as approved Section 1705, the school library programs, stating, schools shall provide reputable and relevant digital and/or print resources for students to access literature and reference materials that relate directly to the educational program and provide opportunities to explore beyond the sphere of the program, of the regular instructional program. Each secondary school shall have a library and shall have librarians as follows. 299 or fewer, 1/2, 300 to 999, 1 full-time, and 1,000 or higher, 2 full-time librarians. Also, this provision shall not apply to schools capable of providing resources, and assistance to students through an alternate structure. The Louisiana Department of Education may request information regarding the services provided in situations where the above requirement is not being met.
Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second.
The motion was seconded by Mr. Romer. Is there a discussion about this motion? Is there anyone opposed to this motion?
Yes.
I am, and let me tell you why, and I regret that I voted yes on the other policy. I was thinking, we would meet the needs of counseling here with library, but then again, the provision that, again, was made just here at this board meeting, I know we had the discussion, but again, those who are capable of providing alternate means, in other words, they can achieve it through alternate means. I'm not in support of that. I believe that we have trained professionals and that we should make every effort to maintain the services they provide. And I apologize to those for my previous vote, but I was thinking that I was doing right by counselors. I apologize, and so I'm voting no moving forward. Because again, these deceptive practices, I have a real issue when we're asked to make decisions just on a whim. I apologize.
I noted one other opposition, 1 other person opposed, and motion carries.
Were you opposed?
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to address item 2357 of Bulletin 741, physical education. My motion is that BESE approve as amended the section 2357, physical education, as recommended by the department. With the revisions before you, and board members, I can explain them. They essentially, they add on to item F, after marching band, cheering, extracurricular sports, and dance team shall include weekly physical activity and encourage the benefits of physically active lifestyle. It deletes the 100-minute requirement that's in the packet before you. And third, F1 reads, the LDE may request information to ensure the requirements above are met. So that is aligned with the former 2 motions as far as the department having the right to ensure that districts are meeting these requirements.
I have a motion. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Mr. Romer. Thank you. Is there a discussion on this motion? Mr. Nakhan?
I would just like to, I'm not trying to get on anybody's bad side, please, or anything, but I just want to say that I think it's important that we keep all 2 credits available for physical education, because a half a credit to some may not seem like a lot, but in some instances you can miss a lot of important skills as we learn. I mean, some of the things in my experience from learning in PE, we learn how to bowl with writing actual scoring. Yes, they do have it in the bowling alleys where it's automatic, but that's a skill that you realize how much work it took in the past. For instance, we learn how to play ping pong correctly. How many friends of ours that maybe didn't go, the younger ones, don't know how to play, and a lot of times they think they're doing right. So it shows you exactly how to play. Capture the flag, ultimate football, frisbee, exercises and stretches. And especially those stretches and exercises, you do that in all 2 units of throughout the whole thing before you do an activity. And also, and you can use that whenever you go into the extracurricular sports. So I think it's important that we keep that, because in all those, in the entire length of the time required for PE and physical education, you're exposed to things, especially some of the sports. You might be exposed to baseball, and then you might be encouraged to go try out for the baseball team at the next season. And I think it's important that we keep in mind that even though it is a half unit that we were talking about, I think it's important to keep it.
Madam Chairman, may I speak to the motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. I appreciate your perspective, and what I really like about the direction that this board and this department is taking is that we are increasing the flexibility. So someone like you who believes that it's important has the right to do it. In fact, you could take 4 years of physical education if you wanted to. But I would also acknowledge that what's being brought into as credit, and that is the marching band, cheering, extracurricular sports, and dance team, are very rigorous sports, fitness, health-related activities. And I dare say that a half unit in PE versus participation in one of these activities, I can't say that half unit PE is any more valuable than that. So what is important about this policy is that it increases the options and flexibilities for students like you, but it also addresses the needs of students who may need that extra half a year to do some credit recovery so they can graduate on time, or they may want to take an AP class, they may want to take a career class, or it just increases the flexibility. So as important as PE is, we're not eliminating it. It's still there and available as an option. And if the professionals in the physical education arena continue to import the importance of physical education to students, they will continue to take it. I have a daughter who took all 4 years, even though she ended up with 9 advanced placement classes when she graduated, because she loved physical education. She didn't need to. She absolutely loved it. So I was happy that it was available to her, but I was also happy that other students had flexibilities.
And I understand we have differing opinions. We all have the same goal in mind. I just wanted to state my opinion as well.
Thank
you.
Just a point of clarification. You said something about needing 2 units of PE to graduate. The way I'm reading this bulletin as it's been is that it's 1.5. Am I missing something?
It's my mistake, my bad.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand this. So,
I've just
thank
been
you very
confused
much.
all day.
No, I get it. There's a lot of stuff here.
Yes, ma'am.
it's important, so we have, I have a question about this item. So it's 1.5 to graduate. What are the requirements, and where are the requirements housed for middle school physical education requirements? And where do I go to see this?
In which bulletin?
Yeah.
They're in the bulletin, in this bulletin.
They're in this bulletin, but not in all this beautiful paperwork I have? Okay, thank you. Can you tell me what they are? 150 minutes a week
But
for
where?
middle school.
There is a bulletin for PE standards. It is only
It's in the PE standards bulletin.
Okay,
don't
so
know the
PE
number off the
standards,
top of
it's
my
not
head.
in 741?
No.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you. Is there any other discussion about this item? So I have a motion on the floor. I have a second. There's no more discussion. Anyone opposed to this motion?
Opposed?
I oppose.
Mr. Garvey and Ms. Beebe are opposed to the motion. Motion carries.
Ms. Bofi.
Yes, ma'am.
I just think earlier Mr. Lee might have hit on something, and I want to bring it to your attention. He discussed Section 505, the certification of personnel, and if we continue with this language, it says, it makes reference to the certification or services provided in public schools and charter schools or public schools. It states that personnel shall hold a valid Louisiana teaching certificate, and I don't know if that's why you brought it up, Mr. Lee, but that's a point well taken. On page 21, section 505, it says to be eligible legally for teaching, administrative supervisory or other professional services in public schools of Louisiana, personnel shall hold a valid Louisiana certificate appropriate to services rendered, or shall receive annual approval in accordance with provisions allowed by BESE.
Ms. Beebe, I think that you and Mr. Lee are hitting on something that could be a technical
That's what I'm
revision, and I would, as the chair of this committee, if you would like to get with the department this evening and talk to them about some type of technical revision, and we discuss that tomorrow, since it is something that we didn't pull this section, so we've already voted on it, we didn't pull it. I can pull it tomorrow if you can work with Mr. Lee and the department on that this evening.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am? Thank you. Next item?
Next item is on page 97, item 4.2, consideration of revisions to non-public bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for Non-Public School Administrators, to update and streamline policies related to the administration of non-public schools. Department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
Is there a motion on this item?
I'll make that motion.
So I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Orange Jones. Is there a discussion on this item? Superintendent, I'll let you explain it to us.
Thank you. Members, just to remind you, there are two bulletin 741s. There is the public school and the non-public school. The non-public school doesn't include many of the elements that we just discussed with respect to, for example, personnel issues, as we do not have domain over personnel issues in those schools. However, there are specific issues regarding the academic regulations that govern public schools that also govern non-public schools and relate, for example, to high school graduation. The changes that are made, that are proposed here, are precisely the changes that are proposed in the public school bulletin 741. For example, flexibility regarding the granting of high school Carnegie credits, the number of instructional minutes in a given year, as opposed to prescribing the length of days and the number of days, the physical education dimension, the non-public schools' ability to purchase textbooks not on the approved state list, and the ratios regarding library and library materials, as well as the summer school element that was in, and the need to approve summer schools that was in the original bulletin 741. We think of these changes as quite literally the same as for the traditional public school system. These regulations are, the ones that I mentioned, are the same in word as they are in the original bulletin 741, and are asking for your support of these changes in schools that are not actually run day to day by our public school boards.
What did the non-public commission say about these changes?
As with the Superintendent Advisory Council, we worked with the non-public school commission on these changes, and they support them unanimously. They also had significant input, as with the Advisory Council, in terms of actually working through the language.
Thank you. Board members, discussions on this item? Do I have any public comment cards? Come on, Ms. Bradford.
Mr. Bennett indicated to me that he was in support of this.
That's what I needed to know. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Is there any opposition? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Next item is 4.3. Consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana District and State Accountability System regarding updates to the accountability formula for certain school configurations. That's on page 146, and the department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
So moved.
And we have a handout. I'm sorry. There's a slight change.
Members, there is new language being passed out on a technical reason. There was a section that was repealed, section 303 of Bulletin 111, during the changes that were made to the accountability system in June. Inadvertently, that bulletin was used to make some of the change, or was referenced in making some of the changes that are being recommended here today. So you're getting language that addresses that inadvertent confusion. The changes here today are technical elements of the accountability system. They are meant to address the following circumstances. A, how you grade a school and provide a school performance score for a kindergarten through 2 school that has no tested grades. Second, for a K-12 combination school that receives both an elementary and a high school SPS. Third, a 9th grade only school that has no tested grades. And the requirement that by a certain time, all students have taken an end-of-course test. In other words, that at a certain point in your high school career, you must have taken certain end-of-course tests, rather than just allowing kids to go all the way through till the end of their senior year, say, not having taken any end-of-course tests. Those are the 4. I'm happy to walk through them in greater detail, but those are the 4 fixes. They are done primarily to bring the technical elements of our system in line with our ESEA waiver.
Board members, do you have any questions about this item? Mr. Guillot?
Just, there's been dialogue with the superintendents on this item.
Yes, this was passed through the Superintendent's Advisory Council earlier this month.
Madam Chairman, I'll make another motion to approve this as notice of intent as revised. If that helps you?
Does that help us?
Yeah.
They're nodding.
Okay. Just trying to help.
Second by Ms. Bradford. Are there any public comment cards on this one?
Oh,
You have one on 4.
Yeah, 4.4. 4.4 is what you have.
This says 4.4. That's what we're on right now.
Well, if I may, Ms. Bophy, while she's deciding if she wants to.
4.4 or 4.3? Okay, you have 4.4 here.
Okay, you can come up. Ms. Beebe, while she's coming to the table.
Well, again, and as Ms. Hill articulated, the fact that we get these revisions at the meeting, I haven't had a chance to speak with my superintendents. And I know reference is always made to the Superintendent's Advisory Council or what have you, and I recognize the number of districts represented by that group, but nonetheless, they're not representative of the views of all. And I just think it's a travesty that we're presented this information today with revisions without having the opportunity to get input from our people.
Ms. Barrios?
This is where I thank the board today for the first time for following the meetings law and allowing public input. That's a practice that is not practiced by all your council meetings, as was exhibited Tuesday in the SAC committee meeting, which I attended, in which this was part of the subject brought up. The chairman of that committee refused to allow any public comment because of the controversial issues on the table before the teacher evaluation and the SPS board. You have been involved in this previously, probably a couple of times, once for me and maybe for Dr. Mercedes Schneider and her basket. Research is in the process of being nationally peer reviewed, but has been seen and agreed upon or supported by other researchers. It shows that the value added, the BAM measurement that Louisiana has adopted is invalid and bogus, and she points out all the different
Ms. Barrios, that's the next item. This one's on school accountability.
Mr. White just spoke about the staff meeting and the SPS address.
We have an item on,
Oh, wait, are you talking about Bulletin 130 revisions? That's in the EE committee. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the SPS.
okay.
revisions or tweaking.
Okay. Our accountability system and our VAM model are two separate models. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll reset it to 2 minutes.
Included in that conversation was tweaks to the SPS or changes. Mr. Bassett has submitted several papers that show that these scores have been manipulated, that the high scores, the extraordinary high scores this year were a result of different factors, which I personally, I'm not a statistician like these people are, can't explain. But this is just an example of how there really isn't public input, there isn't collaboration, there isn't acceptance, because nobody has offered or agreed to sit down with these people and speak to it. And obviously from the meeting Tuesday, the subject is being avoided. So I just wanted to place my objection to that, and I hope that you all, before you start approving any more changes, you take a close look at that research, and again, take a close look at value added, because there's only one place where this is going to end up if you're wrong, and that's in court. Thank you.
Ms. Sastu, do you have something to say?
Just, this information, may have been times where we did not fully take advantage of the advisory groups and the commissions and councils that because of timing or some other issues in the past. But this item has been fully vetted and before the superintendent's council and before the committee of practitioners, which is made up of district personnel. So I just wanted to make that comment. I have a hard time understanding some positions. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this? Is there any opposition to the motion?
I oppose.
Motion carries. Ms. Beebe was opposed. Next item.
Next item is item 4.4, and that's on page 152, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 118, statewide assessment standards and practices, to revise test security policy to align achievement level descriptors to the Common Core state standards, and to update approved tests for home study students. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
So moved. Ms. Bradford, you're... Okay.
Members, at the most recent Superintendent's Advisory Committee meeting, it was the suggestion of the superintendents that on this item, the policies being put into place might be better considered at a longer discussion than they were able to have at the last meeting. They were generally supportive but the implications of test security policy is significant, and given that the policy suggestion is for a 2013-14 implementation, not for 2014-15, there's not great urgency on passing the policy. Thus, we think it probably is prudent to follow the guidance of the superintendents on this one, as with past votes today, and to defer on this item.
Substitute motion to defer.
Madam Chair. Madam
Just
Chair,
a second. Yes, Mr. Lee?
can I make a motion?
Yes.
I move to approve the revisions to Bulletin 118, statewide assessment standards and practices as presented, with the exception of the revisions within Section 305, test security policy.
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, so I have a substitute motion. Is there discussion on the substitute motion? Is there any public comment? Is there any opposition?
My cheat sheet.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is item 5.1. This is on page 191. And there's also another letter I'm going to pass out to you all. Consideration of public comments received and policy previously approved regarding Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, Section 1129, Administration of Medication, and Section 1130, Diabetes Management and Treatment. The department recommendation is to rescind the board's previous action and retain public comment for consideration in March 2013.
And direct the staff to not move forward with the proposed rule for
So
741.
rescind the action and not move forward with the rule.
Members, this is a very technical issue where effectively there are changes that are going forward concurrently in two different bulletins. And that is triggered by a law that was passed last legislative session sponsored by Senator Nevers. The other changes are reflected in 135, is that right?
Yes.
In 135. And as a result, this would be duplicative to insert this into 741 at the same time. Thus, we are asking the board to approve the recommendation to rescind the notice of intent policy in 741 and to retain public comment until the March meeting.
Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Ms. Dastig, is there a second? Ms.
Second.
Bradford, is there any discussion about this motion? Do I have any public comment?
I would just like to ask our executive director to correspond with Senator Nevers and let her know if this action is affirmed tomorrow, let her know that we took this action.
I don't see her, but
If that's the staff, we've heard that too.
Yep. Is there any opposition? Motion carries. Next item.
That concludes the agenda.